Yep. All right. So, naturalism versus theism. You wanted to bring up some kind of criticisms against naturalism, something?
Well, I thought the topic of the debate at first was, are there good reasons to believe in God, right?
Sure, we can do definitely go reasons to believe in God.
Okay. So I'm gonna start out by providing some of the reasons, and if you have any objections, I'm more than willing to entertain them. So first of all, I want to explain something, right? When we're referring to atheism, belief or lack of belief in philosophical context, we're not referring to the psychological state of conviction. Okay.
I don't care what you're referring to. It doesn't make a difference. Like all that
No,
matters
it does
is
make a difference
no.
because
The
we
position of atheism makes no difference at all. Like it doesn't matter if there are atheists or aren't atheists. It doesn't matter if there are people who believe or aren't people who believe. It doesn't matter if any human beings exist at all. All that matters is are there evidences or not. So atheists don't matter to the conversation. Like what is your evidence?
no that is understandable, but I'm simply underlining that the evidence that I am going to give is going to be geared towards putting out ideas on the free market of ideas without regard as to whether an individual finds it convincing or not.
Obviously, like that's just no one cares if it's convincing. What are the evidences?
Okay. So these are the reasons for believing that, first of all, God is more likely than less likely. So the thing that I would put out that would really increase the probability is the non-natural is first of all the definition, right? God under most definitions, certainly under mine, is a disembodied mind. Okay. And
Why
I think
is the definition evidence?
no, I'm giving a definition to provide reasons, right, for the probability.
I thought you said the first reason was because of your
Well,
definition.
I corrected it. I'm first giving the definition,
Oh,
so that we're
okay.
not confused. Okay. So the definition is a disembodied mind. I think everybody would be I think everybody would be fine with that, right? I think you don't have qualms about us defining it as a disembodied mind. Now, of
Yep,
course, there are certain
that's usually what I do too. I say that God is
okay,
in
good,
some kind of non-physical mind. That's how I define the supernatural, for
great,
sure.
amazing. So here are reasons that increase the probability for there being a ultimate disembodied mind like God. Okay. So the first thing I would say is that all minds we've observed seem to invariably have properties that are non-natural, and some of them would be normativity, intentions, and qualia. Now, if something else comes to mind, I will say that those are the ones that I can currently formulate. Now, this second,
All right, let's start with that one.
sorry,
So you
go
said
ahead.
intentionality, normativity,
Normativity, intentions, and qualia.
qualia. Okay. Um, oh, the consensus in every field is those are all natural. I don't know why you think how you've concluded those are non-natural based on anything. There's no evidence to support that whatsoever.
Well, because I presume that for you, naturalism and physicalism are interchangeable, correct?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, good. So, by definition, I would assume that in a physicalist world, which you believe, there would not be uh, any truly randomly generated events, and thus no normativity, right?
Well, normativity has nothing to do with random events, but yes,
Well,
there
it
is
does.
definitely random events. Like random events is the consensus, or not, the majority of physicists accept that randomness is a fundamental part of the universe itself.
So you accept that true randomness is a physical property?
Yes.
I can you elaborate because it seems like the physical property seems to imply some sort of PSR, right?
No, principle of sufficient reason is rejected by the majority of philosophers and physicists. But in physics, I don't understand quantum physics, but I just know that in the polls of the majority of physicists, they accept they're physicalists, obviously, and they accept that randomness is a fundamental part of reality. I think it's stupid, but I'm I accept the consensus because they're the experts. So okay, randomness is a fundamental
No,
part of
but
reality.
I want to hear your arguments because true randomness seems to be required for there to be normativity, right? And
Well, that I don't know what that means. I don't know why you would need randomness for normativity.
because otherwise you're in a necessitarian universe.
Well, right. So most like physicists and
Necessitarianism
philosophers.
is
Wait, 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 wait.
necessitarianism is incompatible with normativity.
Yes, I would agree with that. So the most
So how do
physicists.
you
Wait,
avoid
stop, stop, stop,
necessity?
stop, stop. So the question is do you? How does randomness get to? normativity. And well, in most cases, most philosophers agree that everything is either determined or random. Most philosophers and physicists, and they think that randomness can't get you to normativity either. So like uh, everything is either done for reasons, so it's determined, or it's done for no reasons, and so it's random. Neither of those are any kind of free will or intentionality of any kind. It's all just random or determined by other things that aren't you. And so neither of those can get to any kind of normativity. It's just determined or random.
Okay. But for there to be normativity, there must be truly randomly generated events occurring.
What do you mean? Can you like define what you mean by normativity and define and tell me how randomness can get you
Well,
normativity?
normativity is, I would explain normativity in opposition to necessitarianism. Okay. So rather than defining it, I will juxtapose it to necessitarianism. So necessitarianism is something that's opposed to normativity. Okay. If we disagree with
No,
necessitarianism,
no,
we
just
agree
just
some.
just
Sorry.
define normativity for me. Just what the
Well,
word means.
I define it as something that's opposed to necessitarianism.
That doesn't mean anything. You gotta like actually give me a
Do you know
definition.
what necessitarianism is?
You gotta like, give me a definition. So normativity is usually a term used in morality. So it means like a few
Well,
phenomenons and
normativity in this case would be the ability to go with one or the other choice, as in basically there to be more than one way for things to be, right? So necessitarianism would be there is literally only one way for anything to be, whereas
okay, wait.
normativity would be okay.
Yeah, so I totally was misunderstanding you there because normativity is usually used to mean actions by a society to do to
No. That's
determine.
not that's not what I meant.
Okay, so
I meant for the things to be in other ways other than only one way, right? So there.
yeah, so yeah, if everything is perfectly determined, then it can only be one way because it's determined to be that one way.
Not really. That's not really determinism. Determinism still assumes that there could be something like randomly generated events.
Yep,
Necessitarianism is
yep.
a view that says,
So
okay,
I didn't say determinism. I said determined. If everything was
okay,
exactly
yeah,
determined, then
yeah, because
it's
I want to make it clear, I'm a determinist. I'm a compatibilist. So
okay.
I'm not disagreeing with determinism. What I seem to think is under physicalism, right? Normativity seems to go out of the way because
So again, try not to use normativity because it confuses me because goes to morality. So what you're saying is if there's no randomness and everything is determined, then things couldn't have multiple variable ways to
yes,
be.
there can't be things can only be one way, which seems to be contrary to what I call normativity.
Sure. So I don't have a problem with that. Yeah, I think there is definitely randomness and determination are both fundamental parts of nature. I think that there
Okay, but
are.
then I'm asking you, the true randomness is not a physical property, right? There is no physical property of
No, I
true
think it's
randomness.
purely a physical property. I think it's a fundamental property of the way nature is, nothing more.
Okay, then you'd have to explain your definition of physicalism because it seems like physicalism implies physical properties, right? And a physical property explains a necessitates a physical explanation, right? And if there's a
Yeah.
physical
So
explanation,
for example,
there's a
there's
reason for
yeah,
that to be
yeah.
one way or
So
not the other way, which seems to lead us to necessitarianism.
no, not at all. So again, most physicists accept that randomness is a fundamental part of nature, just a part of quantum
Well,
mechanics.
I'm not talking with most physicists. I'm talking with you,
Yes,
right?
you are. So I accept the consensus. If you're asking me what my
You
position is,
have
my
to have
position
an
is the
argument. You
consensus.
can't
So
simply say most
yes, that
physicists say
was I
that.
was getting there. So we know that particles can decay at an infinitely many points in time due to quantum mechanics. They decay at one point, not in the other. So the natural features of the world essentially give you a spectrum of saying here is the possible things that are going to occur in this window, and the actual determining factor is a random factor. It's just a feature of the particles. So it's not a problem in physicalism.
So are you saying that brute facts are physical?
Brute facts are descriptions of physical things, yes.
So, for my mind, physical fact implies assuming or having physical properties, right?
Yes.
So, doesn't definitionally a physical property means having a physical explanation?
Yes.
So, what is an example of a physical property that should not have a physical explanation?
None. I don't know what
If
that
there are
means.
none, then there can't be brute facts because brute facts are facts that have no explanation.
No, you just said the universe exists as a fun, like a necessary part of reality. So you can do the God is necessary kind of a thing. If you want to call that an explanation,
I'm
that's
not
fine.
doing
No. This is what I'm saying. So I'm saying if you want to play with the definition of
Then
brute facts and say it's significant.
then you weren't being truthful before, because you said that physical
No,
properties
it's just that.
sorry,
So
the
no. I
physical
understand what you're
property
saying. Yeah.
necessitates. Sorry,
So
let me finish. You said that physical property necessitates their being
stop.
physical.
I'm just going to mute you if you don't stop. All right. So this is all just gibberish, theist nonsense talking points about brute language, necessary versus brute facts. No one cares about any of that. So we can say in physicalism, the position is that there is some fundamental feature of nature that has always existed and always exists. Whether it's a brute fact or has an explanation or the PSR, none of that gibberish matters. No one cares. Nature just has certain features of itself, and that's fine. Like reality exists.
Look, we're not disagreeing that reality exists, right? I'm asking you to provide an example in your worldview of a physical fact that has no physical explanation. Because if there is a physical fact,
Whatever the fundamental nature of reality is, that would be it. I don't know what that is.
I have to finish the question. You have to listen to me.
You
I
asked
don't disagree that there are
you
brute
asked for a
facts.
physical fact that doesn't have a physical explanation. I can say whatever the fundamental nature of reality is, that's a physical fact that
Okay,
doesn't have a physical
then
explanation.
just a second. So you're saying that there can be physical facts that definitionally do not necessitate physical explanations.
Correct. Explanations aren't physical explanations, are things we've come up with in our head.
So what would be an example of something
Whatever the
physical?
fundamental nature of reality is, which I've already answered like 3 times.
That's just question begging. That's assuming that the fundamental reality of nature of reality is physical.
Right, is that's what we have the evidence to conclude. So based on
That's just
induction,
question begging,
no,
right?
no, no, no,
You're just giving
no,
it as an
no,
example of what's
no.
supposed to
Stop,
be
stop,
proven.
stop, stop, stop. It's not question begging. It's a conclusion based off inductive evidence. If we have
What
inductive evidence,
evidence do you have to suggest that there is anything that's physical that doesn't necessitate physical explanation?
again, physical explanation is a non sequitur. It doesn't make a difference here. All we need to say is we have evidence that there is physical stuff in the universe. We have no evidence of anything other than physical stuff. So if we're saying there is some fundamental thing that exists in the universe, it's probably physical based off induction, like
Look,
y.
physical is defined here. I gave examples of things that weren't physical, and this would be
What do
intentions, qualia, normativity, and
no,
I guess
again,
justified
those
beliefs.
don't you don't get to
But
define them as non-physical. There's no evidence they're non-physical. All the evidence indicates they're physical, so those don't work as explanations or examples.
well, I gave an argument for why, and if you listen, I'll repeat it for
Okay,
you. Right,
go for
the
it.
argument goes that for there to be normativity, we must avoid necessitarianism. That's definition, right? So now I'm saying to you,
Okay,
if you
but
have a,
wait. So I
I
don't.
have to finish.
I'm not following. That's all of that's irrelevant. So most physicists, most naturalists think we can have both determinism and naturalism. So that doesn't help. Like I don't follow in any way
I
how
am
this
a
is
determinist. What
right.
I'm
I
saying
don't
is
care about your position.
Sorry. So
No,
necessitarian.
stop. I don't care about necessitarianism. I don't care about randomness. Every physicist accepts that. Every physicist, for the most part, is a naturalist. So those are not incompatible. We all
We're
accept
not
those.
interested in what you care about. We are
you know,
interested in arguments, right?
saying that doesn't help your position. It doesn't explain anything. So I need to know what is your what is your definition? What is your argument here? Just saying those things doesn't help at all because the majority of
Well,
physicists
the
it doesn't
argument
work.
is that since we have normativity, and since we have qualia, and since we have intentions, they seem to only be possible in a world that has normativity.
It's
And
just an
if
argument from incredulity. So you can't imagine it being physical isn't
I
evidence
didn't
it's not
say I
physical.
can't imagine it,
Well,
I'm
that's
saying
literally
that
what your
it's
argument is.
definitional.
That's definitional as something in your imagination. So you imagine here's some imaginary evidence that you have imagined that
Look,
you think it can be one way or the other.
look, look. If something is physical, by definition, it has physical properties, right?
Right. Yes, it has
So
physical properties.
physical property means that its explanation is
No,
physical, right?
that's completely not at all the
Okay,
case.
then explain it.
Explanation is again just something we've made up, a prior cause, prior whatever. It's not a thing. It's not a physical. It doesn't need to be a prior physical cause. You can have a physical thing that just exists eternally with no cause. That's perfectly fine, but it still has physical properties, like it exists. So it doesn't. So the cause or the explanation and the properties are not the same thing. Those are not synonymous.
No, but it seems to be. Do you accept brute facts?
Yes.
So what would be an example of brute fact?
Whatever the fundamental nature of reality is.
I don't get it.
Like if energy is fundamental to reality, energy exists would be like a brute fact.
Okay, but how can you know that the fundamental
You can't know knowledge of it. The epistemology doesn't matter to the ontology. So if energy is a brute fact, that's an ontological fact.
No, I get it, but I'm asking how can it seems to be that the debate here is whether well, at least partially. Well, I was supposed to give evidence for God, but at least partially it's veered towards whether the fundamental nature of reality is physical or natural. And
Right.
you're saying, and you are just using it as a premise to say it's physical. So now I'm wondering
Well, no,
how
I'm
that's not
just
question
responding
begging.
to your argument. So you said, how is it possible? And so here's how it's possible. My argument for naturalism is it's inductive. We have inductive evidence of natural stuff. We have no evidence of non-natural stuff. Therefore, it's reasonable to conclude everything is natural. That's perfectly fine. I don't have proof of the ontological nature of reality. If I did, then we could just disprove all the supernatural and it'd be done with it. But obviously, we can't disprove it entirely. We don't have absolute certainty. The conclusion that most people use to come to naturalism is naturalism makes testable predictions, supernaturalism doesn't. We have reason to believe natural stuff exists. We don't have any reason to believe non-natural stuff exists. It's inductive. So we can't prove the fundamental nature of reality is
Look,
purely natural.
look, we gave an argument right last time, I think, when you were on our server, which was
I don't at all
the
remember that.
okay, I think you were debating us on idealism
You can
versus
just
physicalism.
give the argument. It doesn't matter last time.
Right. So I don't think you addressed it. We gave the rule following argument that was given.
Yeah, would you like to
Remember?
say it again?
Yeah, so basically the rule following argument comes from Saul Kripke's understanding of Wittgenstein.
Yes,
Some
I'm
people
familiar.
nickname it as Kryptonstein. So basically the argument goes that for intentions to make sense, right? For any intention to be um, senseful, um, they make sense only in virtue of them being correct or not, right? So for their use to be correct or not. So the argument goes
What
something like this. Sorry.
intentions? Like depends on how you define any of that. So
Okay,
intentions have nothing to
so
do with correctness. Like I could have an intention to
so
eat
the
ice cream.
thought experiment is something like this. Imagine someone using instead of addition using tradition.
Quaddition.
So tradition is
Quaddition is the example.
well, there is two different examples. One example is tradition, for example.
Okay.
Kus is another example, but I like this example. So tradition is an example, for example, where the person uses the exact same rules of addition except for one number. Okay, let's say
Okay.
something like 411,000, where the answer is just one more than would be in the normal addition, and that's the rule that person follows. Now the question is, how can we know who follows what rule? And the only thing, how can we distinguish between the intentions? And the only thing seems to be that the intentions are distinguishable is their property of being used correctly or incorrectly. And the argument goes that
No,
since
so that's false. So the reason, the disproof of this argument is the fact that you can distinguish between which variation is used by looking at their brain state and how it developed, and say, well, this is the person using quaddition because that methodology was associated with these neurons, as opposed to addition, which was associated to these neurons and that other person. And so you can't actually do that. It's simply a argument from ignorance, because we can't know by looking at a brain state, we can't know the difference between quaddition and addition, but we can know the difference if we look back in history and say, well, this person learned quaddition and it was associated with the brain state, or some quantum mechanical thing hit their brain and caused them to actually do quaddition instead because they had associated it with addition, but then they had a misfiring in the brain which did quaddition. We can tell the difference physically by looking at the history, even though we can't tell the difference simply by looking at the brain state, because the brain state is arbitrary or something like that.
look, look. So the question goes, right? When we give examples that increase the probability of there being a disembodied mind, right? You can't simply
Well, that's a
beg
refutation of the argument. So I don't know, like, that's why no one cares. So I don't know. So just saying I can't do it, I just did it. I just showed that argument is completely irrelevant.
I
So,
don't understand.
so you said the argument is that there's no physical way to distinguish between addition and quaddition, right? That's the
Yes,
and so if I can give you a physical way to distinguish between addition and quaddition, that refutes the argument, correct?
in theory.
Yeah, exactly. So if we can look at a person's history and how they were brought up, it's the same thing for language. It's like, how do we tell if a person is speaking English or Japanese just by looking at their brain state? Well, we can't, because the association of the brain states is arbitrary. We don't know if that neuron associated with these physical patterns or these physical patterns. because we can't see in the brain state. It could be associated with any number of things because it's like a CD. Like the ones and zeros could be associated in any possible way. We don't know, but you can find out. You can find out what the brain pattern was programmed to do by looking at its history. What
Well,
was
I
it
don't understand how
seeing?
that's not question begging.
What do you
You
mean?
simply asserting that it can be, right?
We literally have done it.
This is what's
We've literally done this. We know this is a fact for language. We can look at a child's past and say, we pointed at that thing, made the noise horse, and they associated horse with the thing. We can't do that in an fMRI. We can't look at the fMRI and say, this neuron is horse. But we can look at a person seeing a horse and have that neuron light up, and then go to their past and say, well, so yeah, we taught them that this language was correct. And so we can learn that the association in their brain to horse in that case, or to qua horse, was caused by their upbringing and their association to that stimulus input and that label of horse. So we can differentiate between quadition and audition in the exact same way. We look at the past, we say they were initially
but
introduced to
past
this idea.
experiences are part of the qualia, right? So
Uh,
it's another question begging argument to say that qualia is necessarily physical
I
without
didn't
any.
say qualia was, it necessarily wasn't ever in my argument. So I'm saying qualia is probably physical because that's the only evidence we have, but that wasn't, qualia was never a part of my experience. So sense experiences, like you can have this all without qualia at all.
What's
You
an
can,
example of experience that doesn't include qualia?
like, C. elegans, that's inputs from outside experience where they're just being poked by things and they can sense pain from their 300 neurons or whatever.
Well, any experience of language learning would have to include qualia, right?
No, because language is just any kind of sense experience response, like just like any response that C. elegans makes. It has some kind of an
But
input
qualia
and.
has to include the subjective experience, right?
Oh, right, yeah. Qualia definitely has to have
So you
qualia.
disagree. So you disagree that language learning and preferences are part of the subjective experience?
So all qualia entails experience. Not all experience entails qualia. You can have
Correct.
experience.
But I suspect that
Wait,
language
wait. So
learning would by
language
definition.
fits into the category of experience. So you can have a
Yes,
language with no qualia. Yes.
yes, but language preferences, the one that you were talking about, like someone, for example, preferring
No,
either
that's
Japanese.
purely part of experience. Like you can have a computer that prefers Windows. Like it can prioritize one over the other
So
for
then, how
certain
do you have
reasons.
normativity in non-qualia experiences?
Again, normativity is a moral thing, so it's not
No, that's
relevant
not
here.
how. That's not what I'm referring to. Normativity here, as opposed to necessitarianism. How do you have non-necessitarianism?
Well, in that case, that
If
would be determined. So you would have a determined choice. Like I'm going to use English because I'm speaking in an English country, per se. So that's determined. And if I'm in Japan, I'd speak in Japanese. That would be determined. That's not a normative choice. I'm determined choice based off of the functionality of the language.
no, but if it can't be any other way, that's necessitarianism, right?
Right. That would just the choices we make about whether we're using audition or quadition or English or Japanese. Those are all determined. There's not a free choice there.
I got it, but is there any other way it could have been? Could we have had any other preference? Now, determinism doesn't.
I don't know what you mean by that. So, for
So
example,
look,
if
there's a difference between determinism and
I
necessitarianism.
understand that already.
Determinism, I'm going to explain it for the viewers. Determinism, right, presumes that all current events are fully caused by antecedent conditions, but it doesn't take a position on whether it could have been any other way. Now, necessitarianism presumes that things can only be one way. So now I'm asking you, under the definition, under the scenario where someone learns the language without qualia, could it have really been any other way? And the honest answer seems to be no. It couldn't have been any other way. It could have only been one way. And if it could have only been one way, then
So you're
it
confusing too many topics here. So obviously, like macro things couldn't have been any other way given the same laws of physics. Like if we restarted the world 4 billion years ago, it's pretty much going to turn out the same. Like if there's no, it's not going to have been differently because the laws of physics are going to have been the same. But there are certain things that could be differently, like the decay of a particle or quantum mechanical things or the rate of virtual particles in certain areas. There are definitely small things that could have been different and would have been different. The large macro things would not have been different. So language would be the same. Your determination to choose a certain language in certain cases would be the same. So the only things that could be different are essentially quantum mechanical fluctuations in Hilbert space. That's the only thing that could randomly be different.
I see, but where's human normativity in that?
There isn't any human normativity. I think humans are purely determined. Well,
I understand, but then do you disagree that agency requires normativity?
yes, agency I define as just the compatibilism, the brain state acting without any external forces acting upon it.
So how would you distinguish between a human agent and a mechanism?
Uh, Again, that's an epistemological question. Doesn't matter to ontology. So
But I don't.
how I can distinguish it doesn't make a difference. Like there's definitely ways to make it indistinguishable. There's definitely ways to give machines consciousness and give them the same level of agency that we have. So I wouldn't say they're fundamentally different. One is just like I would say rocks don't have choice. They don't have neurons. They don't have a brain that can interact with the environment. So they don't. And so if it has a brain that can interact with the environment, then it has some kind of agency.
Okay. Look, if you have a physical property, right, that necessitates no qualia to go on to rule following arguments, right, then you would necessarily have to exclude the personal experience of language learning in that, right?
No. Like
I don't see if you have a mechanism that is or agency, I guess, that's learning languages because of previous factors without personal experience, right? Which would be qualia. Then my question is what's the personal experience or association that goes into language preferences?
your past experience. So, for example, if I know 10 different languages, I have past experience of these
No,
people speaking this
no, no,
language.
no. I'm not talking about experience. I'm talking about subjective experience, the quality. Okay, so when we're learning languages, or when we are, well, I
Right.
speak
So,
three
quality
languages.
experience is not required to learn language at all.
No, but it's no, but qualia. If qualia is not required to learn language at all, then then there shouldn't be differences between the experiences, right?
What? That's no, that would be separate. So, it would make no difference. There can be differences. There can be no differences. It would be irrelevant to the argument. So, like, it doesn't require quality experience to feel pain or to like to do computation, but so whether or not we had quality experience or not would be irrelevant to the computation. So like if I had like it's what's his name, Plantinga's evolutionary argument against naturalism, I could experience being a toad on a rock and doing calculations, and you could experience being a human playing a video game and doing calculations. So our quality experience is completely irrelevant to the calculations. The thing we're doing, the language, is irrelevant to the quality experience.
But you just mentioned that there are different preferences that lead us to use language one way or another, right?
The preferences are determined, so they're purely just I'm in
No,
China.
but then there, just a second. You agree
Uh,
that there are subjective experiences
sure.
that, so these subjective experiences are the ones that determine what rules we follow,
No,
right?
no. The
In the rule
subjective
follow, no?
experiences are post hoc or epiphenomenal. They don't actually determine anything. They're
So then what do you mean when you say past experience? I mean, I just
so
presumed.
there's the quality experience is a present thing. The past experiences is something that happened to your subconscious mind, regardless of whether or not you were consciously aware of it, that shaped your brain in such a way that it determined it to have certain ideas subconsciously that determine your actions subconsciously that have nothing to do with your conscious state whatsoever. So all of that can be done without any reference to qualia at all.
Then I don't see how the human mind is still an agent and not a mechanism.
Because we don't define agent as having free will. You don't need free will. You don't need.
I, no, I don't believe in libertarian free will either. I'm not asking about free will. What I'm
So
asking,
agent is compatibilism kinds of free will. Like we're totally fine with that. We don't need agency can be a determined
I
process in the
agree, I
brain.
agree, I agree, but I just want to know how you escape from necessitarianism under that view.
Again, the fact that there can be random processes in the brain doesn't give you agents any more than
Okay,
determined processes.
but
It makes no
when you have
difference.
truly random, you're saying that there is absolutely no reason why they happen, right?
Yes, no determined reason. It's just like you have a
No, no
range.
reason at all.
Yes, no determined reason. That's what it
So you
means.
have absolutely no
So wait,
reason
wait, wait. So
for.
you can have like a determined spectrum. A dice can fall on 6 different things, and it could be, assuming this is a quantum dice. There's nothing that determines which of the 6 things it's going to fall on, but it is within a spectrum. It's going to land in one of those 6, and not a different object. So you can have a spectrum that's determined, and then have a random choice between the spectrum that isn't determined. But it doesn't need to be
So
fully
now I'm asking you,
random.
how is complete randomness reducible to physical properties? Because remember,
There's a physical
for
property that can produce randomness. Like that's a thing. Like
no, we don't disagree that there are physical properties that can produce. We're saying
that's
that
like
randomness. Sorry, we're saying that randomness itself must be reducible to physical properties,
it
right?
is a physical property. It's not reducible. It is a physical property. It's a property of physical things.
How is randomness a property of physical things if physical things can't account for it?
Those are 2 separate things. Like brute facts aren't accounted for, but they are physical things. You can have physical facts that are brute facts
Well,
and
I
have no.
disagree there, but I
Well,
think
your
that
opinion on it doesn't make a difference. So, in most naturalists agree, you can have physical facts that are brute facts, and they don't have an explanation. You don't need an explanation for a fact to be physical. That's not what makes it physical. That's a dumb definition. Physical just means it's like measurable or
so.
determinable by reality.
Do you distinguish between physical reductionism and physicalism?
uh Physicalism is the mind is purely physical. Like I mean, I'm sure physicalism would be like there are many kinds of physicalism. And
Wait, sorry. You don't agree that everything in the world is physical. You just think that the mind
well,
is a
no, you
product.
asked like would I see those two as being like synonymous. Like well, I'd say it's kind of like all flowers are roses, not all roses are flowers. I wouldn't think that everyone who is one would necessarily have to be the other, but it could be.
So, isn't it a fundamental component of physicalism to assume that all facts are reducible to physical properties?
Yes.
So, when I ask to reduce true randomness to
It
physical
true
properties,
randomness is a physical property. Period. End of sentence. Done.
that's just an assumption. That's just question begging.
Assumption doesn't make a
I
difference.
don't
So
see where
you
the
wait,
reduction
wait.
is,
It
right?
doesn't.
Physical
No.
randomness.
It does.
Sorry.
Stop.
I
Stop.
wasn't.
I'm gonna
I
mute you.
wasn't
I'm gonna
done.
mute you.
I
I'm gonna
wasn't
mute
done
you.
talking.
I'm gonna mute you.
You're over.
So it does. Just saying it's physical doesn't need to be. It's made of other physical things. There can be a thing that is itself fundamentally physical, and that's fine. It doesn't need to be made of other
How is
physical
that not
things.
question begging what you're engaging in right now?
It's not question begging. This is a question of what is possible. This isn't a question of I have evidence of this. So this isn't saying like this is the case necessarily, haha, therefore my argument is true. You're saying how is it possible? How is it possible that this thing can be physical? It can just be a brute fact physical thing. That's not a problem.
Look,
So question begging is like if I assume this is the case to make another argument, then that would be question begging. I'm not using this to assume it's the case to make another argument. I'm saying this is what the consensus is in physics right now. This is based off of our evidence of how natural and physical stuff works. There is no contradiction saying there is a thing that is itself fundamentally physical. It doesn't need to be made of other not physical stuff. It's just a property of physical stuff.
okay, look. If
Like
you have, am I muted?
Wait,
Am I muted right now?
no, I didn't mute you.
Okay. So, okay. So you hear me? Good. So look, I don't think that I'm not saying that it should consist of other physical stuff, right? But it should be reducible. It should be, at least in theory. Like not like I'm not asking you to give examples, but at least in theory, it should be. You should have a scenario where a physical fact can further be reduced to other physical facts. Like, for example, I agree.
Okay, so wait, let me give you an example. So
Sorry.
space and time are physical things. So how would I give you a sufficient answer to explain that for what you're asking for? Like space and time is really reducible to physics.
Time is a bad example, but if you were to say
Well,
space,
no. Time and space are the same thing. They are literally physical. They literally exist. They are literally physical things.
well, I subscribe to B theory of time, so it's kind of.
I'm not. This is not. I'm not. I don't care about your position here. I'm talking about Einstein's.
I get, but let me give you an example.
Wait.
Let me give you an example.
This is a clarified question. So you keep asking, well, how do you reduce this concept or this property to physical things? So here's the concept property. Space-time is a physical property. What would be a sufficient answer to your question to give you what you're looking for, because I don't understand what you're looking for in this question.
Okay.
How
Look,
do you answer that space time is
the
physical?
assumption goes, right, that space itself, I mean, assuming you're a metaphysical naturalist, which is what I assume you are, right? You
Yes.
assume that
Well, I'm
everything,
methodological, but yeah,
even what, sorry?
methodological naturalist, but we can take metaphysical naturalism
Okay,
too.
okay. So methodological naturalism, from what I understand, when used in a non-science context, simply means I'm going with naturalism until further proof is provided, or something like that. Whereas metaphysical naturalism would be that even the things that have been historically termed metaphysical are part of the physical experience. Okay, so I don't think there's a much difference. I believe you're happy to go with either one, right?
Yeah.
So so sorry, I got this right.
So
So
again, my question is you want to know how
So
this
in the
particular
space, so if you were to say, for example, the space is physical, right? Presumably, the argument after that comes that the workings of space can all be reduced to physical properties, as
no,
in,
that's gibberish. That is what you're asking. I'm saying how would you what kind of answer would give that would be a sufficient answer to this nonsense that you're saying. Like physicists don't care any of the nonsense you said. We can say space time is
well,
physical,
because
makes testable
physicists aren't
predictions.
doing
Wait, stop,
philosophy
stop, stop,
most of
stop,
the
stop,
time,
stop,
right?
stop, 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 stop. So physicists say space time is physical. We make testable predictions. We confirm the testable predictions. Space time is physical. Done. That's simple. So if I can say if randomness is physical, we can make testable predictions. If we confirm the testable predictions, it's random. Done. That's how we do it. That's how it's done. That's why it's the consensus in physics. That is how we would show it is. But if you have some kind of special needs kind of a definition you're looking for to answer this question, we need to use an example we already have. We know space-time is physical. Tell me what is a sufficient answer to your question in
Okay,
regards to
okay,
space-time.
fine. Look, let's take another thought experiment, okay, if that's fine with you. And this is actually known thought experiment, but I'm going to try to conduct it in a different way. Imagine there is a human being, right? Well, what we call a human being that acts exactly like a human being, but the only difference is that person lacks complete has a complete
P-zombie.
lack of sorry?
P-zombie.
Yeah, I didn't want to say it because I thought you were just going to interrupt me and say, but that person has complete lack of quality and subjective experience. Now, I'm asking for you, in the physical, in the in the type of physicalism you accept, right? What would be the difference? What would be the fundamental difference between that mechanism and our mechanism?
There wouldn't be. So in our case, it's P-zombies are physically impossible in many different versions of physicalism because consciousness is the electrical brain state in the brain. So there couldn't be a physical difference. If you have an electrical brain state producing the brain, you have consciousness because that's what consciousness is.
Wait, I don't. Are you saying that the level of sophistication that we have as agents is impossible without qualia?
Well, you can shut the brain off. So if you have the level of sophistication and it's on, then it would produce consciousness. Yes.
So we don't. So what would be the difference between consciousness and highly specialized robots?
Highly specialized robots will have consciousness once you get them to have a brain state. Yes. Like AIs will have consciousness.
Okay, so so how do you differentiate between consciousness and qualia?
I don't. They're the same.
You don't.
Nope.
So consciousness is the same thing as qualia.
Yes.
What distinguishes one consciousness from another consciousness?
The fact that you're experiencing it, the brain state that's producing it.
No, but what distinguishes one brain state from another brain state?
Well, if they're separate brains, that would be how.
No, but they're the same mechanism, right? So what's the
Well, I
factor that
have
makes them different?
this is a cup and this is a cup and they're different cups. They're the same mechanism but different cups. They're doing the same thing in different locations, different places in space and time. They're not connected. That's how.
No, but what I'm saying is, why is there a difference between their individual qualia? Why isn't the qualia the same?
From 1 second to another second or something. Like
Well, why does the experience vary between between brains of similar structure?
because they have different sense experience. They have different past things that determine their brain state. So
But shouldn't
because your quality experience is determined by your neurological state. So if there are physical differences, you'll have physical things that you appear differently. If they're physically the exact same, and they're getting the same sense experience, then they would see the same things.
And what's the argument for that?
Um, if I show you a picture of a dog, you will see a dog.
How is that an argument for?
It's an argument for the similarity of sense experience. Like we can have similar descriptions of what we're seeing. Like if I show you the difference between red and purple, you can say, "Ah, this one's red, this one's purple," and we can. Every human being in society can say, "Yes, this one's red, this
Okay,
one's
but
purple."
the difference here comes not with sense experience. Everybody agrees that there are parts of sense experience we can agree on. The part that's called qualia is the one that's subjectively different.
Right.
So,
It's
for
the
example, if somebody shows you a picture of a dog, the subjective experience you
so
have
again
when
so
seeing that
yeah, I
dog.
understand. So if the qualia experience, the product of consciousness, is a result of your brain, and your brain is determined by your neurological state, which is determined by your sense experience. So we can say that if your conscious response, this one is red, that is along this line. So that thing was determined by your neurological state, which is determined by your experience, which then also determines your qualia. So we can infer that if you say this one's red, that is the qualia experience you're having as well. So it's
So are you saying that quality experience can be predicted if sufficient information was known about neurology?
quality experience can be predicted just by me asking, "Is this a dog?" and you saying, "Yes." I can predict what you're thinking of. I can predict your
No,
quality
you can.
experience.
No. The quality experience can be the associations I have with the dog that are not might not even be conscious. They might even be
Right,
subconscious.
right. So
So now
you
I'm
could
asking,
be.
are you saying that all quality experiences can be predicted if sufficient amount of
I
knowledge,
don't know.
if we had
All is irrelevant here. So I can predict the quality experience of other human beings by showing them a picture and saying, "What is this?" Or imagine. I can say, "Imagine a unicorn." I can predict your quality experience, and I can predict the quality experience of every listener by.
no, you cannot,
Yes, I
because
can.
that's not quality experience. That's subjective. That's just experience, right? That the quality
What
experience would be the subjective
Right. So I
subjective
can
properties I assign.
what you're picturing in your head right now. Not I'm not talking about your brain state. I'm talking about you have a subjective quality experience. You have an image in your head that you are experiencing of internal experience that we cannot see with an fMRI. I can predict that by telling you, imagine a unicorn.
So that would simply tie in our similarities, right? That
Right.
wouldn't at all, at all be talking about the type of qualia that we have.
No,
So
those are the same
I'm
thing.
just
So I have a quality experience, and I can make an analogy to you and make a test of here's something that I experienced with my quality experience, and then I can see, well, do you have the same experience, and make predictions and say, well, if you experience the same things, here's how you will respond to this question. And if I get that right, I have good reason to think I can predict what your quality experience is. Yes, so I can predict your quality experience and anyone else's the same way of anything in science. Whether or not, I mean, we could totally find a way to physically determine what qualia is in the future with super good fMRIs or whatever, but that's irrelevant. I can do it now just by an argument from analogy with evidence from our inductive past. We can already do that.
But that wouldn't be a good argument at all that it's physical, because that would also be expected under the uh, super or paranatural
Well,
model, right?
so expected doesn't make a difference. That's post hoc rationalization. It needs to be a novel testable prediction for it to be evidence.
Look, for us humans, right, to ask something, for us humans to have um for physicalism to be tenable in this position, you would have to have certain experiences like qualia be reducible to physical states. You saying that I simply can predict them by me also experiencing qualia is not you being able
No,
to
no, no, no.
reduce it
So
to.
again, every problem of underdetermination, every hypothesis can all explain the past data. So none of the past data is evidence of your hypothesis over mine. What is can I make novel predictions? Can I predict something in the future we don't know yet and get it right? If I can do
Okay,
that, then
so
my
let me
theory
ask
is
you this.
better than
So,
yours.
so
Well,
what
wait, just to clarify, it doesn't matter if you can also say, well, I could explain that later after we know it.
no,
Doesn't make a damn bit of difference. So the fact that naturalism makes testable predictions all over the place and gets them right all the time gives us evidence that hypothesis is true. And the fact that the supernaturalism or whatever alternative you want to go with doesn't is evidence it's not true.
So are you willing to give a physical model of, sorry, are you willing to give a model under which purely physical purely physical processes can result in agents having justified true beliefs?
Um, well, my personal epistemology would be how we define justified true beliefs is completely separate. It's irrelevant to the conversation.
No, but you agree that agents like humans have justified true beliefs, right?
Justified true beliefs are essentially a kind of language that we define a certain brain state in a certain way. So depending on how we define the brain state, yes.
So no. Justified true beliefs
Yeah, brain state.
exist.
So justified true belief is a brain state. You have an idea. That idea has other related ideas, and those ideas indicate
the brain state. Sorry, the brains. If justified true belief is just brain state, right? Why would you expect that brain state to be modified with new evidence coming to light?
Because that's how it's designed to work. Like, certain brains do not work that way. We can shock your brain to make you change beliefs. There are certain brains that, if you give them new evidence, they get more convicted in their false beliefs.
By definition, right? Justified true belief implies accepting beliefs that are in some way true, right? So I'm not talking about any belief. I'm just asking, how can a brain state hold justified true beliefs? You would have to give
a model.
Sorry, I wasn't done talking.
I know. I understand your question. I just can stop you there and answer it. So there isn't the justified true belief. The truth isn't proven. We don't have the proven truth. What we have is we have reason to believe it's true, and we think it's true. It's a belief. So we have belief. So
is there any proposition that you would say is true?
Yes, but again, the truth isn't in our heads. What's in our heads is a belief it's true. And so so we can't have the truth isn't contained in our heads.
But that justified true belief, or that brain state, as you want to call it, has to definitionally be matching external reality, right?
For it to be true.
I'm asking you what physical model is there that can lead to such a state?
So again, if we have an idea, if I imagine a cup and the cup is in reality, then it's a true belief. So the truth isn't in our heads anywhere. It's just whether or not our imagination corresponds to the thing outside of our imagination.
These beliefs are not random, right? We are led to hold these beliefs based on what we observe.
Right.
So now I'm asking, what's a physical model that can account for these without going to any subjective qualia experiences that you will just be question begging are natural, right?
Exactly. All of that can be explained just by experiences without qualia. You can say the computer, the C. elegans has a model of reality.
That's another question begging. The experience isn't reducible to physicality.
So qualia.
Sorry,
I'm going to mute you. Stop. Okay, so again, remember, we talked about this before. There's a difference between the experience and qualia experience. All qualia experience requires experience in general, but experience does not require qualia. So you can have kinds of experience. So kinds of experience can have that interaction with the world to create a model of consciousness, whether or not it actually does or not. So you can have that, like in C. elegans, it has a model of reality. It has experience. So it has a correlation between its experience and reality. Now, whether or not it turns that into a belief in a conscious way is independent. Those are independent things. So you can still have that. You asked, how can you have this without qualia?
No, they are dependent, because otherwise it wouldn't be a justified true belief. It's definitional.
No, again, definitions are never evidence. Definitions are all, this is something you imagine. They're always
listen, definitional arguments are deductive arguments.
Right, okay? So if you don't know that,
don't know that,
I just agreed with you. Shut up. I just agreed with you.
You have to go back to school.
I'm going to mute you. So yes, definitional arguments are deductive, and they're all imaginary. Deductive arguments are imaginary. This is
I don't understand. The imaginary world would be just the realm of Neoplatonistic forms, which is idealism, right?
No. That's not what I'm saying. Not what I'm saying at all. So again, there's a difference between stuff in our head and stuff in the world. The arguments for valid arguments, deductive arguments, conceptual arguments, all of that stuff is stuff in our head. It doesn't exist in the world. It's completely imaginary. So deductive arguments are not evidence of the world; they're evidence of how we imagine the world.
Are you saying that the forms in our heads do not have physical existence?
No, I'm saying the forms in our head may or may not. The fact that they're forms in our head tell us nothing. So saying it's definitional just says it's a form in your head, and then you need some additional empirical evidence to show it's true about
Look,
reality.
look,
So
wait, wait.
wait. So let me clarify here. So what you're saying when you keep saying it's a definitional argument is this is something you imagine to be the case. It does not say anything about whether it
No,
is or
you're
is
not.
not the case.
Once again, if you want to argue that definitional arguments are imaginary, you need to go back to class, right? To
No,
learn
it's
what
that's
definitional arguments.
everyone in philosophy agrees with that. Definitional arguments, a definition is something made up by a mind. That is a fact.
Okay.
Deductive arguments are
Look,
things made up by minds. That's a
look. First of
fact.
all, you agree that these forms or imaginations have physical existence, right?
Many of them, yes, not all of them.
So what would wait? Are you saying that there are non-physical imaginations?
Unicorns do not exist in reality. They don't exist physically outside of our imagination. So they exist physically in our imagination.
No, but okay. So this is just obfuscation. Listen,
I have no idea what you're saying.
justify true belief, right? For there to be for an agent to hold justified true belief, their belief that they're holding must in some way match the external stimuli. So that's why we call them
Right.
justified true beliefs
No,
as
no, no,
opposed to
no, no, no.
dreams,
It has to. It has
right?
to. It doesn't justify the stimuli. It has to match reality. Whether or not it justifies the stimuli is different. So your idea in your head has to match reality. Then it's a true belief.
So now I'm asking, sure, I agree with that, but now I'm asking, there has to be a fundamental difference between dreams and justified true beliefs because dreams are basically randomly generated
No,
beliefs.
you can have a justified true belief from a dream.
No, you're not understanding. Dreams are randomly generated ideas. So I have beliefs in the dream that's not in any way connected to the outside world, right? For example, my
You can have justified true beliefs that are randomly generated.
that's a non sequitur. You
Okay.
cannot have well. Are you saying then that justified true beliefs mean that the belief is in some way matching the external stimuli? It has
No,
to be
that's
something
just
else.
true. That's just the truth. The truth is it's matching reality. The justification come from lots of different places.
So now I'm asking you, how can a physical model account for agents having
All of them do. That's really simple. So
present one that can?
all of them, just any model. Like we say, we have beliefs that are purely reducible to brain states, and those beliefs correspond to reality, so they're true, and they have justification, which is pick your model of epistemology. Each epistemology has a different qualification for what qualifies as justification, and if they meet that through other sense experience, then they are justified in concluding that their belief describes the outside world. Like every one of them does this. So where do you think the problem is here?
The problem is that for there to be a justified true belief, there has to be a system that's working in proportion to correctness and incorrectness in regards to the development of the brain. Okay, so look what I'm saying, right? If you have a brain that's a mechanism, essentially it's a complex mechanism, right? This mechanism has to be developed in a physical world working towards the correctness. So the only reason the justified true beliefs appear are in virtue of there being an incorrect and correct belief, and brain is just a mechanism that is accustomed to this and can you know exclude the incorrect and narrow down to the correct ones, and that's why our experiences change based on evidence, right? So now I'm asking,
That's definitely one possibility, but it's not necessarily true. You could have a brain that's just randomly generating ideas, and it happens to
but
stumble
it
across the.
wouldn't be, but randomly generation would be completely opposed to any sort of order in
No, that's
I'm
wrong.
kind of
So again, just like think evolution. You can have evolution randomly generate a bunch of random things, and the false ones are filtered out by something. So if you have
no,
a
but
brain that randomly,
evolution is not the main driver of brains developing. It's
that's
natural selection,
different.
right?
This is not, this is just an analogy. So I'm not actually making an
Okay,
argument
okay, sure,
from
okay.
natural solution here. So I'm saying you have a system of random generation, and something filters out the bad ideas. So you can have a brains that randomly generate ideas, and something happens to filter out the bad ideas. Whether it's the brain or something outside of the brain, the ideas being generated by the brain are filtered out by something. It can still lead
Okay,
to justified true beliefs,
okay, but that filtering mechanism has to be working, right?
right?
In virtue of correctness and incorrectness.
Wait. It just has to be working. Like it could be working for just a random or determined process. It doesn't need to. It doesn't even need to be a part of the brain.
But for it to be successful, it has to be working in virtue of correctness and incorrectness.
What that's a tautology. That's like saying for it to indicate true beliefs, the true beliefs have to be true. Like So like if I like imagine if we have brains generating true and false ideas, and all the false brains just happen to like smash into a wall or something, well then it filtered out all of the bad ideas. None of this has anything to do with reality itself. It just happens that all the brains that generated false ideas just happened to get smashed, and the ones that didn't happen to get smashed. I mean, there's it doesn't ha- the, I
No, but
don't.
there is no guarantee, right, that the
There's
brain
never a
that's more.
guarantee.
I understand, but what I'm saying is there is no evidence at all that the brain that's more close to reality is more likely to survive. Instead, the brain that's more resistant is the one that's more likely to survive, right? So,
What,
so
what, what does that what does that have to do with your point?
my point is that since correctness and incorrectness are irreducible to physical properties by definition, and since our brain that
Wait. Go back to that. What? So correctness and incorrectness.
the property of correctness and incorrectness are not physical.
Right. The property of there isn't a property. It's just a description. We're saying our sentences, which we made up, do or do not correspond to reality. That isn't a physical thing. That's
I understand what you're saying, but look, for the brain to develop justified true beliefs, it has to be working in virtue of being correct.
no, it doesn't.
But it has to definitionally,
No, that's
because otherwise,
fallibilism. You
no.
don't
I'm
need to do
sorry.
that.
I wasn't done. I wasn't done. If the brain is developing justified true beliefs, right, or whether the mechanism that's filtering out the brain, it has to be working mechanistically. Its success is dependent on its correctness and incorrectness, right?
Again, no. So again, we can just get rid of justified true beliefs. You don't even need them. Like you can just say there are just brains, like chimpanzees before there were any humans that had no justified true beliefs, and they're surviving purely on like Plantinga's evolutionary argument of a false worldview entirely that just happens to work or whatever, and that's fine. You don't like what you're saying makes no sense. Like justified true beliefs are a thing we've come up with in our heads to like a description. It's like the English word tree. The English word tree doesn't exist anywhere in reality. It's a thing we've made
But
up.
but English word tree is surviving based on its ability to accurately describe reality, right?
No, because like the word Klingon is surviving, but it doesn't describe anything in reality. So that's not how words work.
It has to describe a certain quality of reality, or at least a form.
An idea which doesn't exist independent of imagination.
And an idea would have to be matching the external world for it to be a justified true belief.
Again, so justified true belief is an idea. So that's like just saying tree. So again, so you're just saying here is a definition we humans have made up. Our human definition doesn't exist in reality. Therefore, there are non-physical things. Like no, it's just an idea we've made up in our heads. Ideas we've made up in our heads are just brain states, but those independent brain states don't exist outside of our heads.
But the brain states have to be predetermined by antecedent conditions, right?
No, they can be random and still be justified.
Random events are still antecedent
Um, oh,
because they
okay,
occur before the event, right?
sure. So our brains
So now I'm
didn't exist
asking you,
forever.
these antecedent conditions are successful based on their ability to correctly describe models. So I'm asking you, how can you
That's
reduce
again
the
a
state of
tautology.
correct?
That's completely irrelevant. So we have
I
brain
don't see
states.
how it's a
So
tautology. What I'm asking
saying they're
you is,
successful because they describe reality, that's literally a tautology. Like that's what we're using the definitions to mean when we say successful and describe reality. So that doesn't mean anything. We can have brain states that are unsuccessful, they still exist, that's fine. I think we have brain states that are successful, and that's fine too. And there's no difference like fundamentally between the brain states that have correct beliefs and false beliefs. One just happens to correspond to reality and one doesn't. That isn't a physical property. That's just saying my imagination does happen to represent reality and yours does not. The brains both all have the same essential properties. There's no like second property in the brain state that has a justified true belief to the one that doesn't have a justified true belief. The thing that makes them different is the imaginary thing. The brain state creates an image of reality that does look like reality. It's not a property. There's no extra property there.
the extra look, if there is no property of correctness and incorrectness, what differentiates a successful brain from an
Again, so
unsuccessful?
one brain that is correct has an image of reality that looks like reality, and one brain has an image that does not look like reality. Plantinga's evolutionary argument is naturalism. One brain is imagining itself as a frog on a lily pad, and it's really not. It's a person playing a video game, but it's
So
successfully
what
living.
generates those beliefs?
Um, could be any number of things. Normally, it's past experience. It could be a random process. It could be a quantum fluctuation that just
The
made their brain
processes, the
fail. So, but
experiences
none of
have to
that
be
matters.
physically generated for physicalism to be true, right?
Yes, they're all physically generated. So
So now I'm
you go
asking
with
you,
Boltzmann brains. The
what's
Boltzmann
doing the
brain.
generation of experiences? What's generating the
Again, the
experiences?
experience doesn't matter. It's all just the physical determination of the brain. The brain then generates the experience. So we can have a Boltzmann brain that
Based
pops
on
out of
what?
nothing, based on all the evidence we have in neurology, psychology, physics, philosophy,
No, no, no,
everything.
no. I'm not asking you based on what we believe that. I'm asking you based on what does the brain do the generations?
What, based on what does, like, the conscious states are generated by brain states through chemical processes? I don't know what you mean.
I understand. So chemical processes generate beliefs.
Consciousness. Uh, yes, most beliefs. It could also be you can shock someone's brain and produce a belief that way.
That would still be a brain state produced. That would still be
Yes,
a chemistry.
that
So
would be
now I'm asking,
electrical.
if you're saying, yeah, okay, I get it. But if you're saying that chemical reactions can produce justified true beliefs in general, just beliefs,
Yes,
right?
yes.
Then I'm asking, what is the what is the mechanism that works to what is the mechanism that is working towards ensuring that those beliefs match reality more accurately?
Again, that's irrelevant. It doesn't make a difference. Like you can have a brain that does do that or a brain that doesn't do that. There can be states that it could be things that do it, like natural selection, which I would say does that, or things that don't do that. But that's irrelevant to the brain state. Like the truth, like you said, the correctness or the falsehood, that isn't an independent property. There's no such independent property of existing that is correct or incorrect. That is a description of whether or not our ideas happened to match reality, but that isn't a property. There's no such property of as correctness or incorrectness. It's not a property. It's a description of things.
Which exist objectively.
Right? Reality exists. Yes.
So the property of matching that reality is something that exists as well.
That's not a property of a thing in itself. That's whether or not the thing happens to match the reality. That isn't like a property. That's just a description of a thing. It's not. It's not a fit. It's not a property.
So the ability to match the
Like tree.
external,
Like if I say tree, tree isn't a property. Tree is a description, right? You would agree.
of course.
So the same thing is true about correctness. Correctness is like tree. It's a label we apply to things that,
Okay. So when we say tree and we mean the whatever the tree is, right?
yeah, green,
That
green and
is
stuff.
okay, yeah, green and stuff. Then that is our brain um doing its mission, as in giving us
Right. So we say
accurate.
the tree has these properties and we label that as tree.
So if somebody else is using the word tree to refer to socks, what would make them different? The
Um,
virtue of using the word incorrectly.
Differently. They're using the word differently.
So is there a correct usage of words?
No.
So then what's the point of dictionaries?
Usages is to make it common so we can communicate effectively, but words have usages. They're not correct or incorrect. Like language is arbitrary. Natural ambiguity of language. Steven Pinker.
I don't understand. The property of correctness is incorrectness is what
No, again,
determines.
there is no property of correctness or incorrectness. Correctness and incorrectness are things like a tree that if this thing has these properties, then we label it with that label. The correctness and incorrectness are not properties, just like tree isn't a property. It is a comparison of does this thing that has properties have these specific properties, but it isn't a property in and of itself.
If it's not a property of it to be correct or incorrect, I don't see.
Again.
I
So which part of that didn't you understand? So correctness is
Okay,
if
what is the
this.
virtue? What is a virtue by which a certain internal stimuli matches the external ones? What's the in virtue of what?
In virtue of what? What do you mean in
Yeah.
virtue of what?
In virtue of what does, for
That doesn't
example,
make
a
sense.
listen, look. What in virtue of what does the internal experience
Again,
More
I'm asking, what do
accurately,
you mean by in virtue of? That's the part you need to explain. You can't just say it again. Like, what do you mean by in virtue of? Are you saying like what determines the experience to match
well, I'm,
reality?
I'm saying uh, what is something that gives us the right, if you will, to state that one thing is, for example, approaching the description from the internal stimuli to the external stimuli more correctly than the other thing, right? So,
We just
for
use
example,
induction. We don't have any proof of that. We inductively conclude it based off of our best guess. We don't have any proof.
induction already presumes that there is something to go by, right? Because induction already assumes that we have something to go by.
Yes.
So I'm asking, what is that something that by which? Because at least from my perspective, we have had this notion of correctness and incorrectness. Now, whether we can go down and understand it is irrelevant as long as
Yeah,
there
our
are
measure is
these
survival,
properties.
essentially. So we say if I have an idea of the way reality is, that if I drink water, I will survive. I drink water and I survive. And that's essentially our measure. Natural
No, but
selection.
no, that's not how natural selection works. But you're not.
Yes, it is.
I think you're not understanding my question. It might be my job of not making clear.
Well, no, I think I understand. I think you're asking like, what is it that? How do we conclude that our ideas or experience do or do not match reality? That's essentially seems to be like what you're asking, right?
No, look, we have determinations to make that a certain internal stimuli, like a human brain, is matching the external stimuli more accurately. Okay, so for
That's what I
example,
said.
so if the correctness and incorrectness are arbitrary descriptions, what else is what else would you say, in virtue of what else can we make the determination
Again,
upon which one is more correct and less correct?
so again, correct and incorrect are a measure of ontology, not epistemology. So how we do it makes no difference at all. It's whether or not, whether we can determine if a belief is true or false, makes no difference at all. It's irrelevant and completely irrelevant.
So
All
when
that matters is whether or not it is true or false. What makes it is true or false is if the idea we have matches the same properties or closely matches the same properties as the way the reality has in that whatever you're imagining. And then we
but
label
the
that with
close
correct.
matching is the virtue of being correct, right?
Right. We label
So
it
I'm asking you,
correct.
if those are imaginary, then what is the other virtue that is objective that exists, in virtue of which one person is closer to matching and the other person is less close to matching it?
I don't even know what you're saying. So I imagine more of the properties accurately to reality than you imagine the properties reality. It's like I imagine there are the cup is round and metal.
How do you make the distinguish?
Again,
How do you
just
distinguish them?
the epistemic question is irrelevant to the ontological question. Like we
Okay,
could both be
can
in the
they be
matrix.
distinguished? Can they be distinguished?
Can they be distinguished? Yes. Like if you had a if
In
you
virtue of what?
correspondence to reality. So if you were an
But
all-knowing.
correspondence to reality implies a scale upon which someone is
Right, the
closer,
scale is
correct?
reality. Reality is the scale. So if
So
you
you're
were
saying that the correct and incorrect are parts of the scale. Now I'm asking you, how can
what?
correctness and incorrectness be reducible to physical
Correctness and
properties?
incorrectness are nothing. They're words like tree. They literally are nothing. They are if
Okay, now
this
I'm asking.
idea
Look,
corresponds to reality.
You're not understanding. You have
So
to
so
follow me.
let me see if I can. So we can tell a difference if you were an omniscient being and know literally everything. You can say this idea does correspond to reality more than this idea. So you can distinguish them. You can say this person
So
had
that's the
these
virtue of correctness.
rights.
So I'm asking you, how is correctness reducible to physical properties?
The correctness isn't. The correctness is irrelevant. It's they have an
I don't
idea.
care what word you use.
No.
You
I
agreed with
understand. I
me that
understand what you're saying.
the only way to, sorry, the only
Stop.
way.
I'm going to mute you. Stop. So yes, the person has ideas. Like they are taught to they've shown a picture of a horse and they say that's a horse. Nowhere in any of their beliefs is the correctness. Correctness is irrelevant. Correctness is an omniscient being saying, yes, they have an idea of a horse and that horse does exist in reality. The properties they are imagining do correspond to the thing in reality. There's no correctness property anywhere in their head, just like there is no tree property anywhere in a tree. It's just a thing. These things have this set of properties, which corresponds to reality, which has these set of properties. There is
What
no
determines
correctness.
what corresponds closely and corresponds less closely
Reality
to it?
determines that. Reality is do I imagine these properties? Do they actually correspond? Yes or no, which is determined by
No,
an omniscient being.
You're not understanding. Reality is what these internal beliefs are supposed to match.
Right?
So reality cannot determine whether they're matching them, right? I'm asking
So
you,
an
what
omniscient
determine?
being is outside, he's looking at you, he's looking at your brain state, he's saying, yep, your ideas match, his ideas don't match. That's what's determining.
So what's the so in virtue of what that omniscient would that omniscient being know whether something is matching reality closely or less closely? You can't say reality because that's just a bullshit answer.
Wait. I
That's a
don't know
non-answer.
I don't know what you mean. So if he knows reality and he knows your brain state, he can match the two and say yes, these match or they do not match. The properties
So
you are imagining, like you
you're
list
not on.
10
You're
properties,
not
you
understand.
imagine them. It
You're
has
not
weight,
understand.
it's
There has
height.
to be a scale, right? There has to be a scale
Wait,
upon which.
stop. So take my analogy. Tell me how this is not answering your question. There's an
Okay.
omniscient being. It sees your imagination of a horse. It sees the real horse. It says in reality, the real horse is this length, height, width. It has this much weight. It has this many properties. And you imagine a set of properties, and it can say these properties match the properties in reality, and it can determine whether or not there's truth there. Where is the problem with this answer?
Because the person who's the theoretical omniscient being has to have some scale upon which someone would be matching more closely and less closely. This scale has
I just
been
listed the
sorry.
scale.
This scale has been used.
I
This
just
scale
listed the
has been
scale.
referred to as the correctness and incorrectness scale.
Yeah, I
Now
just
that
listed
we're
the scale.
eliminating these properties, I'm asking you, what's the virtue by which someone
No,
is
wait,
closer and
too
less
many
closer?
gibberish words there. So I just gave you the scale. There are a set of properties. If the number of properties match the properties of the horse, that's the scale. More properties equals more accurate. Less properties equals less accurate. Where is this a problem?
In virtue of what do you determine
I
whether
don't
more scale?
understand that
Sorry,
gibberish. What
listen,
that means?
listen.
I don't understand what that means. Ask it a different way.
Okay. If you have a scale by which you can grade, for example,
Right.
the how many properties match and don't match, right?
Right.
This scale would be referred to, or whatever you want to call it, I would refer to as the correctness incorrectness scale. More
Sure.
properties match, the higher you are on this scale. Less properties match, the lower you are on the scale, correct?
Yes.
Now, if you want to eliminate the scale and say that this scale has no objective existence, I'm asking you, in virtue of what do you approach it more closely or less closely?
Again, the scale is just a description of whether or not the properties exist. So scale doesn't exist. The scale is imaginary. The scale is saying I have an
Then, in
imagination.
virtue of what are you closer or less close to the actual reality? In virtue of what?
In virtue of reality, like literally saying, "Are you
Okay,
closer to reality?"
that's
means
a
you are closer to
dumbass
reality.
answer.
No,
Okay,
that's literally
that's
what.
a
No,
stupid answer. I
I'm
don't
almost
know
stop. I'm
how
going to mute you.
someone like you could
Stop. I'm
give
going to mute
such
you.
a stupid bullshit
I'm
answer.
going to mute you.
You don't.
Muted. Oh, great. So you're muted. That's so fucking dumb. In virtue of reality, what makes you close to reality is in virtue of reality, you moron. Like, holy shit, there isn't like an independent scale, independent of reality, that's measuring whether or not your idea is close to reality, you dumbass. Clearly, the measure of whether or not an idea is close to reality is whether it's close to reality. That's kind of the thing. Like, if I imagine a horse, I imagine it has height, I imagine it has weight, I imagine it has hair. Does it have height, weight, and hair? Yes, it has height, weight, and hair. And that's what measures its close to reality, you moron. It is not an independent scale that exists outside of reality. It is, does the idea match reality? Does my picture of a horse I drew match a horse in reality? Like, there's no like independent scale measuring my picture and judging whether or not my picture is accurate. That's stupid. It's literally just saying, does this image match the photons? If I like held it up, would the photons pass in the same shape as the horse? There's no independent scale. That's just stupid. All right, you're unmuted.
Okay, so am I Am I
Yes,
audible now?
you're
Okay,
audible.
good. So I asked you a question, right? In virtue of what is something matching reality? And your answer was in virtue of reality.
Yeah, that's
If this
literally
is not the most batshit
I'm gonna mute.
answer,
Okay, mute it again. Don't even go with that stupid shit anymore. So again, my answer to your question was: if I draw a picture of a horse and I hold it up to the horse, the photons of light will pass through the picture in the same shape as the horse. That's a correspondence to reality. There's no independent scale there. It's just the photons. The representation of the physical stuff matches my idea of the physical stuff. There's no independent scale. It's just fucking stupid. All right, you're unmuted.
if there is no scale, then there can't, by definition, be a reason why something is more
Okay, so
close
I
to
just debunked
reality.
you.
And
I just debunked
I
you.
have to finish. I have to be able to finish, right? Because you keep
Well, wait, no,
muting
no.
me every
So
time.
you need to address my refutation of all of your bullshit.
It's not a
No,
refutation. It's a repetition of the same bullshit.
you need to address this and see how it doesn't work. So I have a picture of a horse. I drew a picture of a horse. I held it up to where I'm seeing the horse. The photons pass exactly under the image. It draws it out exactly. There's no independent scale there. There's no stupid dumbass scale somewhere in the universe to measure this. But it's still true because it matches reality.
But how would you distinguish, for example, something that actually matches reality and something that is perceived to match?
You don't need to.
What do you mean you don't need to?
Like
If you have
again,
something that is perceived to match, it's not
no, no,
matching
no. Again,
reality.
so we're asking
How
what?
would you
No, no.
distinguish between them?
Remember. Epistemology and ontology. This seems to be your complete confusion. You just don't understand the difference between epistemology and ontology. How we know makes no difference. It doesn't matter.
I understand that. I
We're
get it. I
saying
agree.
if it matches reality, what is the scale? The scale is reality. Ontology is reality. You don't need some independent epistemological scale that determines reality. Reality is what matters here. If it matches reality, that's what determines it. Your epistemological ability to do so is irrelevant. So if I'm
But
holding
the
up,
matching,
imagine I have a perfect omniscient being who understands reality, and I hold up a picture of a horse that sees the horse and that matches the horse's shape. So I hold it up to the horse. Oh, look, I cut out a picture of a picture and it just fits the horse perfectly. That matches the horse. I don't need some kind
look,
of independent scale here.
so I believe that there's a sheep in the field, right?
Sure.
Okay. So there is a sheep in the field. This is the actual reality, the external reality. I believe that there is a sheep in the field. The other person believes that there may be a sheep in the field, and the third person believes that there cannot be a sheep in the field. First person is correct, second is incorrect, but more correct than the third one, and the third one is incorrect. Now, I'm asking you, this is a scale of how close they approach what is actually happening, which is there is a field in the sheep in the field.
Yeah.
Now, I'm asking you, if the sheep being in the field doesn't if the perception of sheep being in the field doesn't have an internal property of being correct, in virtue of what is it more correct than the other person who believes there may be a sheep in the field?
So let's say that all of these are Boltzmann brains that just popped into existence 5 seconds ago, purely out of just nothing but randomness. Random brain generator, Boltzmann brains. You're familiar with Boltzmann brains, right?
I've heard of it, yeah.
Okay, cool. So they're just brains that just pop into existence as is with an idea. Now, they know nothing. They have ideas that are just randomly generated. One is that there's a sheep in the field, one is that there may be, and one is that there isn't. The way we say which one is correct is an independent reference point. So we say if there's an omniscient being, it can see all brains, it knows what they're thinking, and it can see reality. It can say, well, this one, the properties that this brain are imagining do or do not match the properties in the field. The brains don't know shit. They're all Boltzmann brains. They just magically popped into existence. The brain that has the idea of a sheep can have a justified true belief. The other one has a justified false belief, and the maybe would also probably...
Are you saying it's possible to know something that's false?
Yes. That's called fallibilism. It's literally the consensus in philosophy.
That's simply so moronic on a scale.
Idiot. Stop. I'm going to mute you.
I can't even describe.
Muted. This is the consensus in philosophy, you dumbass. This fallibilism is the consensus of all philosophers. If you want to argue against that, go argue with the philosophers. It's like saying that fallibilism is dumb is like saying that, well, the world isn't round, because clearly it's just so stupid. If you want to argue against the consensus of philosophers on the basis of the foundation of everything in epistemology, go bother them. Not me. I didn't invent fallibilism. I don't like it, but it is there. It is the consensus. Go bother them. You're unmuted.
So just to repeat for the audience, you're saying that a person can know something that is false.
Yes, you can have a justified true belief that is false, or you can have justified false belief. You can have a justified.
Do you understand that knowledge is definitionally something that can...
Again, fallibilism.
So how can someone know that the Earth is flat?
So it's yeah, you're right. I probably should have phrased that better. So you can have a justified false belief. That would be the correct way to phrase it.
There is no way to know something that's false, right?
Yeah, it's only knowledge is a label. It's like saying that's a tree. You have knowledge if that happens to be true in reality.
So in virtue of what?
Again,
don't say reality, because that's stupid.
Again, you being an idiot doesn't make it stupid. If it matches reality, the fact that it matches reality is the determining factor. That is the scale. Does it match reality? That is the scale.
But the matching has to be in virtue of something. What do you mean by match?
Again, if you're saying it matches, the virtue by which it matches is the thing it's matching to, you moron. That is the definitional usage of the words.
In virtue of it being more correctly associated with
you dumbass. If you're matching something, the measure of the matching is the thing you're matching to, by definition. Always, necessarily, deductive logic. You don't get an option against that. If you're matching something, the virtue by which you're matching is the thing you're matching to.
So me using the word tiger to describe walking four-legged creatures that have stripes is by the virtue of it being a tiger. How is
Is
this
the
not
virtue
as
of no, no, no,
stupid as
is by the
answer you've
virtue of it
ever?
being a four-legged creature that has stripes. That is the match. The label doesn't make any difference. So if you're saying a tiger is a thing with four legs that has stripes, and it does have a four-leg with stripes, so the word, there isn't a truth to tiger. Tiger is just a label. So if you were imagining a tiger to be a four-legged being with stripes, and that's what we use tiger to mean, then yes, that is correct. You're matching it to reality. You're not muted.
That's the stupidest answer I've ever
Like
heard, because
if you're just dumb and you don't know how language works, you need to just take it up with basic linguistics 101. We have an idea of words, and if like an idea of a tiger, does an idea of a tiger match the actual thing of a tiger? Yes.
but the matching has to be
In virtue of the tiger. It's in virtue of reality every fucking time. If you're too stupid to understand that, you just don't understand how matching works.
No, but this for the matching, for it to match even in virtue of reality, whatever that means, it has to be correctly describing that reality. So the
Yes.
property of correctness
Isn't the property.
is an essential part of
there
it.
is never going to be a property of correctness. Correctness is the
It's
word
not correct.
tiger.
Then it's not correct. Then it's not correct.
No, the proper, it's a definitional thing.
If it's incorrect, if it's not correct, it's incorrect. That's the
obviously,
definition.
but that's not what I said. I said the word correct does not describe a property. Properties are not a thing that exist. It is a label. It is a label of a tree. Trees are not, tree isn't a property. Tree is a label of a thing that has properties. Correct isn't a property. It's a label of things that have properties.
My conceptualization of the tree is more accurate towards the external reality than perhaps somebody else's conceptualization of the tree. So
that means
in virtue
it has
of
more
what?
Properties in correspondence
So that's
with reality.
that's the property of correctness.
No, there is no property of correctness. I've already debunked you on this. If you're just going to go back to this, I'm just going to end this because I've debunked you on this entirely. There is no property of correctness. Correctness is just a label we give to things that have a certain more or less properties that correspond to reality. But it isn't itself a property any more than tree is a property.
Yeah, I'm not understanding why you are not getting such a simple concept, right? I mean, this has been known since the time of Plato, and the fact that you are presenting yourself as knowing what you're talking about while not understanding the simplest.
Again, we've debunked you on this. Like, no, there is no property of correctness. Correctness is not independent of physical things. It's just, does these properties more or less correspond to the thing in reality? You've been debunked on that point. You got to unmute yourself.
Am I unmuted?
Yes.
All right. Since we're not getting more headway here, I will move on to my second reason why I think what increases the probability God exists.
Sure.
The second probability would be the so-called argument from beauty. So the argument goes something like this: in a world where a ultimate disembodied mind exists, it is more likely for beauty to exist. Since beauty exists, likelihood of such a disembodied mind existing is by definition. I have to finish.
Wait, no, I got a question.
By definition.
Question. So by beauty, do you mean beauty is like an independent objective thing? Because beauty can exist as a subjective thing in a mind just fine. What do you mean by beauty?
It doesn't. Well, there is a universal perception of beauty. Right?
That is common to all minds. So you're saying beauty is objective, and for an objective beauty to exist, you need a non-physical mind of some kind.
I'm not saying you need to. It increases the probability that there is,
absolutely.
Since it would be expected. Okay, so that's my second argument. That would be my second argument for what increases the probability of there being a God. What's your objection to that?
What's your evidence to include, like, if there is an objective beauty that's more plausible under a non-physical mind model?
Because we would expect it in such a model.
That doesn't make any sense. That's just circular. So I can say I'd expect it under a naturalistic model. Purely physical model. I can say beauty is a law of nature like gravity. Purely expected.
Yeah, but beauty is objectively shared within minds, right?
Sure, so is gravity.
No, gravity is not dependent on your experience. It's not upon your
yes, that's what objective means. So if beauty is objective, then it's objective like gravity is objective.
But what I'm saying is it's mind independent, as in it exists beyond the mind, but it's not like a law the same way, for example.
Right. So my counter argument is saying you expect beauty to exist under a non-naturalistic hypothesis, and that's your evidence that beauty is more likely under a non-naturalistic hypothesis, I can say I can expect beauty under a naturalistic hypothesis like gravity. I can make a hypothesis of naturalism that would expect beauty, just like you can make one that of a non-naturalism that expects beauty.
What's the evidence that we would expect it under the purely physicalist model?
What's your evidence that we'd expect it under the non-naturalist one?
Because since it's mind independent but appealing to all minds, we would expect the other mind that is able to fathom it to be responsible for something like it, right?
I have no idea what you just said. So how do you get to we expect?
Since it's appealing to only the minds that have experience, if there was a mind that existed, that had experience before our minds existed, we would expect there to be things that are only appealing to minds, right? Now I'm asking you, what's the naturalistic model of that?
No, so that didn't make any sense at all. Like say there is no, our
fact
minds
that you're
don't
not
exist.
understanding doesn't.
No, that isn't an argument. That's not gibberish. So we just have God's mind, only God's mind, and God has beauty. Why should God expect that beauty is a fundamental part of reality and not just a product of nature that it doesn't know about?
Well, because God hears the mind as a preeminent mind. But what I'm saying is
circular. So like we're saying there is a mind, a single mind. It is an experience of beauty. Why would it be more likely to conclude that it's a product of a mind rather than a product of a natural law? Like just say we popped into existence 5 seconds ago. We know nothing about the world. We have this experience of beauty and we have the experience of gravity. Why would we conclude that beauty is more likely to be a mind thing than opposed to gravity?
Well, because gravity is not something that's appreciated by a mind, right? Gravity is something we learn about. Beauty is something that's only appealing. Sorry, beauty
so you're saying
is
it's like a properly basic belief. We just start with beauty somewhere inherently or something like.
Well, beauty is the beauty. For beauty to have an appeal, you have to have a mind. Whereas gravity doesn't have an appeal, and any appeal that gravity could have
requires a mind. So anything you say appeal requires a mind. So your experience of gravity requires a mind because you have an experience of gravity.
So your positive experience would. So if somebody
go back to my example. Go back to my example. So we have I just popped into existence. I have an experience of gravity holding me down. I have experience of beauty when I look at that flower. How am I concluding? What evidence is there to conclude that my experience of beauty is any different from my experience of gravity?
In that case, I don't know, since in that example we don't have other minds. But since now we have other minds to corroborate.
So let's add in another mind. We have 2 minds. Me and you are on an island. We both experience gravity. We both experience beauty when looking at the flower. How do we conclude that the beauty of the flower is different from the gravity of the
Well, if gravity is also appealing, then that would go under beauty. So it would just make no difference. If gravity is appealing, it would go under beauty. But listen,
right. So I'm not saying we find gravity beautiful. We both feel it. So it's holding us down. We feel this thing holding us down to the ground, and we feel the sensation of beauty.
Because to feel gravity, you don't have to have a mind, right? So any kind of feeling does presuppose, I guess, minds, but the gravity does work on a computer I'm sitting on, and it doesn't have to have a mind. Objectively, it experiences gravity. It lacks the ability to.
Okay. So let me see if I can. So when we see the flower, we see beauty, but the flower doesn't see beauty when it sees us. But the flower experiences gravity. So gravity affects both of us and the flower, but beauty only seems to affect us.
Beauty, for beauty to be appealing, you have to have a mind. If we propose the possible world there is a mind, we would expect beauty. There's a beauty. The possibility that there is this mind goes higher. I'm not saying that.
Go back. So just stick with my analogy. We're on an island. We see a flower. So your argument seems to be that gravity affects us and the flower. Beauty only affects us. But that's still no reason to believe that there is some kind of another mind outside of us. We could just say it's a product of our minds.
You have to listen to how the argument is phrased.
Well, I listened. It doesn't make sense.
For beauty to work, there has to be a mind. That's not the same for the gravity. So, for example, gravity works on my computer. It's not a mind.
Right.
For beauty to work, there has to be a mind. In a possible world where there is a disembodied mind, we would expect beauty. More generally, we would expect things that would only be appreciated by minds. Since there are such things, beauty is the best example.
Okay,
the
so
probability
going back
goes up.
Going back to my example, so we're on an island. We're sitting there. Gravity affects us and your computer and the flower. Granted, yes, gravity affects all of these things, and beauty is only things we experience. The computer doesn't experience beauty. The flower doesn't experience beauty. Now, I conclude this is just a product of our brains. It's evolution, nothing more.
It, it's you're
So,
not. So look, it's mind independent. Beauty is mind independent because
d-
all
d-
minds experience. It's not dependent on any one mind.
no, not
So now
everyone
I'm
does
saying,
experience beauty, so that's false.
who doesn't experience beauty?
There are many kinds of conditions that don't experience beauty. There's like you could have, I forget what it's called, the non-brain syndrome, essentially, where you don't have a brain, or you only have parts of a brain, or there's parts of your brain that are
So
damaged.
the ones that have minds, the way we would recognize it, do experience beauty.
No, no, that's false. There are people who have, there's a certain condition where your emotions are damaged and you still have like everything conscious about you. You can still eat and move, but you don't have any kind of sensation of preference or beauty for anything. It's just gone. It's a product of the brain as far as we can tell.
That still doesn't disprove the idea that it's mind independent because it's not dependent on any one mind, right?
I don't know what you mean. Because like Klingons aren't dependent on one mind either, but they're clearly mind dependent things.
What's clinging on? What do you mean by clinging on?
Klingon, the Star Trek character,
Oh, okay, right, right. Yeah, I thought you meant the word.
yeah,
But the difference is that in a world, like, you still haven't given how the probability goes up with purely physical model, because your initial argument was that my argument doesn't work because I'm just post hoc proposing that that's the way it should be. Whereas I gave an example, since it's one mind independent but dependent on minds existing, this would increase the probability that other mind would be able to appreciate such things, right? For there to be such a thing. Now I'm asking you,
right, right. So,
under
so
the
my
naturalist
my
process, what's the alternative to that? What's your
right. So,
naturalistic?
like, if we have a brain that sees a flower, it's possible the flower exists independent of reality. Now, if there's no brain to see the flower, then no one can see the flower. But that doesn't mean that flowers are, there's some kind of objective mind there. So I would say that, like, if our brains see beauty and there is another mind, it sees beauty too, because beauty is a thing that exists independent of any minds, just like the flower. So
But that
it's
doesn't
a
change the fact that beauty is still there, right?
right. I'm granting the objectivity of beauty for the sake of the argument, saying beauty is there.
So
Um,
beauty has to. Do you agree that for beauty to be beauty, it must be appreciated by minds?
sure, I guess.
So would you agree that the property of being appreciated by minds would be something that would increase the probability of there being a mind, a preeminent mind, rather than decrease it?
No, that's the part I'm disagreeing with. So I'm
Okay,
saying that.
where is the disagreement?
So I'm saying that the experience. What do you say? The appreciation of beauty could be
Yes,
epistemic. It could be. It's not an intrinsic part of beauty. It's just our experience of beauty.
but even that experience is mind independent, right?
Our
It's
experience
not
is
dependent.
our experience
It's
is
not.
mind
No,
independent.
no, 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 no. I'm not saying the ability to find aesthetic quality, to take pleasure in this, is a feature that can only be appreciated by minds. Now, I'm asking you, if there is such a feature that's not dependent on any one mind, how does that not increase the possibility of there being a mind that preeminently saw that it was pleasurable or experienced it?
Because the thing would have existed first before the mind saw it to, or like the beauty would have existed prior
That's
to
just
the
question
mind.
begging. That's just question begging.
It's not question begging, it's a hypothesis. So I'm saying you have a hypothesis, which you assume is true for
So
whatever
how is your
reason,
hypothesis more likely than mine, given that you're not willing to provide anything that would increase its probability?
because we have experiences. So I have an experience of that is a flower. Now, the flower could be a part of our minds and nothing more, or it could be a thing independent of our minds and we just have this experience of it. And so beauty is the same thing. Maybe beauty is an idea like a unicorn or a Klingon that we just made up, or it could be a thing that exists independent of our minds and is in reality, and we're having an experience of it that gives us this kind of feeling. The god, if there's a god, would have the same thing. So it could be either it could exist in the god's mind like a Klingon, or it could be the god is experiencing the flower like we are, and it experiences the beauty. So it's essentially the youth of Frodolan. Is something good because God said is good, or is it good based off some independent standard? It's just as likely that there is an independent standard that beauty exists as that it would be that there is a mind that grounds beauty. So it could be grounded in a law of nature, it could be grounded in a mind. Both of those are possible. There's no reason to
So what?
prefer one or the other.
Okay, so what I'm saying is, in a world that's the product of a mind, essentially, would we expect there to be things that can only be appreciated by minds. Are you willing to
Maybe.
say that there is no way to tell?
I don't know what you mean by that statement, so I'm not sure.
So in a world that is a product of a mind,
Well,
which
no,
is what
I
God
heard
is.
what you said. So, like, in a world that's a product of mind, would we expect things that can only be appreciated by minds? Like, if the mind could generate such properties, yes. Like if there was a world created by a mind, would we expect unicorns? If the mind could imagine unicorns, yes, we would expect that.
So what's any hypothetical deductive argument that actually supports that, other than just saying it?
Uh, what? Like if there's a mind that does something, we would expect that the mind imagines the thing it's doing. Like it's just tautology. It's not like a deductive argument.
But since we agreed that beauty is mind independent, that argument doesn't seem to make sense.
Um,
It's not dependent on any one mind. So what's the point of you bringing one mind that's able to experience it?
well,
I mean,
I'm using the God example here. So if it's contingent on God's mind or something, then it would
yeah.
be like that's kind of the example I'm using. So either beauty is grounded in a God's mind or it's grounded in something independent of a mind, right?
Okay.
And so if it's grounded in a mind, obviously we would expect there is a mind that has this beauty property somewhere in its nature and it generates this beauty property in its imagination.
Okay, but I could just as well use a version of the anthropic principle. You know the anthropic principle?
The one that's there's infinitely many things, and so our universe had to come about the way it did
No,
because
no, that's not what I mean. The fact is that the universe that we observe. So basically, it's a cosmological principle that the theories of the universe are constrained by the necessity to allow human existence. So what I'm saying is that
what no,
our
the
ability to
anthropic principle is that there's just enough universes that our fine tuning is explained by just simply probability. That's the anthropic principle. I
no,
don't
I
know how
think
you're
the
using that here.
anthropic principle is basically that any universe that humans are discussing is necessarily has to be compatible with the
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
idea of so what I'm saying is I could just as well use the same thing by saying that the fact that there are such conditions that allow us to discuss beauty and for beauty to exist must necessarily be compatible with there being some minds that can appreciate beauty.
Sure.
So how is that not more compatible in the world that's non-physical than the world that's physical?
Because a mind to appreciate the thing doesn't mean that it's grounded in a mind. That isn't supported. That's not a supported
But
reference
but but
inference.
but it seems to necessitate some sort of minds if there are experiences that can only be appreciated by minds.
It
So
necessitates
so
the
if it necessitates
experience
so if it necessitates some of our minds, why is it not more likely to have other minds that are more
because the
advanced?
fact that we experience it doesn't in any way follow that it's grounded in a mind. That part is the part that's not supported. So saying that beauty, it's required to experience beauty to have a mind. Yes. Does that mean that beauty is grounded in a mind? No. That's the part that is not
It's
supported.
but it is dependent on the fact that minds exist.
Right. So is experience. So experience of photons and colors is necessitates a mind of some kind to experience the colors. But the colors exist just fine with no minds. So just the fact that we need a mind to experience this thing does not count as evidence that this thing requires a mind. So it's the I forget what fallacy it is. The all roses are flowers, not all flowers are roses fallacy. It's like yes, you need if a rose exists, then obviously flowers need to exist, obviously. But that doesn't mean that all flowers are roses. It's composition division fallacy, I believe is the fallacy it is called. So the fact that beauty exists and requires a mind doesn't mean that it must be grounded in a mind. It doesn't mean that it's some fundamental feature of reality. It could just be like gravity or delusions or illusions or Klingons or any of the
Okay.
things else in our
Okay, so
mind.
I'm going to actually read the
Go for it.
read the actual
Go,
Richard
go for it.
Swinburne. He's the best
Go for it.
defender of the
Read it. Go for it.
argument. from beauty. So this is how Richard Swinburne
Yeah,
formulates it.
I've read his book
God
and
has reason
talked to
to
him.
make a basically beautiful world, although also reason to love some of the beauty or ugliness of the world within the power of creatures to determine. But he would seem to have overriding reason not to make a basically ugly world beyond the powers of creature to improve. Hence, if there is a God, there is more reason to expect a basically beautiful world than a basically ugly one. This is what I was saying. A
Yes, so
priori,
I've
let,
talked.
let me
I've
finish. Let me
oh,
finish. A priori, however, there is no particular reason for expecting a basically beautiful rather than a basically ugly world. In consequence, if the world is basically beautiful, that fact would be evidence for God's existence. For if, in this case, if we let K be there is an orderly physical universe, E be there's a beautiful universe, and H be there is a God, well, there's some formulas. Few, however, would deny that our universe, apart from its animals and human inhabitants and aspects subjects of their immediate control, has that beauty. Poets and painters and ordinary men down the centuries have long admired the beauty of the orderly procession of the heavenly bodies, the scattering of the galaxies through the heavens, and the rock, sea, and wind interacting on earth. The spacious firmament on high and all the blue eternal sky, the water lapping against the old eternal
all right.
rocks,
So
and the
yeah, yeah.
plants of the
His argument is the first two paragraphs. So the first two paragraphs, the
okay.
first one says God has a reason to make a beautiful world, and the second paragraph says like nature does not have a reason to make a beautiful world, or something like that.
Well, the argument goes that the basically, with a God in
Could
mind,
you
the basically beautiful
read the
world
like
is
first sentence of the second paragraph? It says
yeah.
something like the
Yeah.
nature has no reason to make.
Hence, if there is a God, there is more reason to expect a basically beautiful word than a basically ugly one. A priori, however, there is no particular reason for expecting
Slower,
a
slower,
basically.
slower. There is no particular reason to what?
There is no particular for expecting a basically beautiful rather than a basically ugly world.
Basically beautiful. Okay, so
In
yeah, so
consequence,
that's those two sentences are the argument, and those two are false. So the first one is God has reason to make a beautiful world. The way
yes,
I've talked to Swinburne and
a
the
basically beautiful world.
yes, that doesn't make a difference to the argument. So the conclusion here is God has a reason to make a beautiful world. That means there's something in God's nature that causes him to do this. And he's saying there's nothing in nature's nature that causes it to do this. This is the exact same as the what's it? Why does the fine-tuning argument for God? Why who fine-tuned God? So if God has a reason to make a universe that is fine-tuned the way that we see it, then that reason has to be intrinsic in God's nature. And I can just say the same thing about nature itself. I can say nature has a reason to produce a
You
basically
don't
beautiful world.
understand. You don't understand. The
I fully understand.
a priori, there is completely no reason for expecting a basically beautiful world.
No, there's
Rather,
a priori. Wait. A priori, there is no reason to expect a God that has a reason to make a beautiful world.
well, if you agree with my definition that God is a disembodied mind,
Right, but
then
wait. So there is, if you agree with my definition of nature as being such that it would create a basically beautiful world.
no, that's not how it works. God is a disembodied mind. We agree
Sure,
on this,
sure,
right?
yeah.
So minds have a reason
Well,
for,
that's not Swinburne's argument.
but that's different.
Wait. So just to clarify, Swinburne's argument is that God has a reason. It's not just he's in his disembodied mind. God
Exactly.
has a reason in his disembodied mind, independent of the fact he's a disembodied mind, that then causes him to make a
Exactly.
beautiful world.
Why?
Right. So well, it's just some part of his nature that Swinburne, I think it's his perfect goodness or whatever that Swinburne uses. And so I can say there is this property of God's mind, which is not beauty. And this property is what causes God to make beauty. I can say the same thing about the universe. The universe has this property which causes it to create a law of beauty or whatever, just like it
But
causes.
there must be no predictive reason for why. That's a complete post hoc.
What?
We have a reason for accounting why
No,
God does it.
So that's exactly post hoc. When I say you've made up a God that has these properties that will make the universe as we see it, that's entirely post hoc. We have a universe, we have this beauty. God made it. That's post hoc, literally.
That's
So
not what we're saying. I think you don't understand.
that's literally what
saying,
Swinburne's saying. I've talked to him about this.
what we are saying. Sorry.
I've talked to Swinburne about this. This is literally what they're saying. They're saying that there is a God who has a reason. And the reason is, this is the key part of the argument. God has a reason. This reason is some feature of his nature that you are post hoc applied to God to say he has this property that causes him to make the universe beautiful. And so I can
But
mirror that property.
we're also offering a reason for why, right? I mean, I don't know if
What is
Swinburne
your
I don't know if Swinburne doesn't go that way, but I
what do you
definitely
mean by a
do.
reason why? Could you explain that?
So, for example, we are not simply saying that we define God in such a way as the God that would simply create beauty. What we're saying is that since God, we're, at least what I'm saying is, maybe I would be shocked if Swinburne wouldn't agree with me on this, but I'm assuming that he
What is it?
doesn't.
What are you saying?
But I'm going to propose this, that since God is a disembodied mind, aesthetics that only appeal to minds are definitionally more likely than a priori. So that changes everything. That's not me simply defining. I'm saying that if it's a disembodied mind, the aesthetics that only can be appreciated by other minds is by definition more increased.
Yeah, so
I don't understand how you agree.
that's definitely not Swinburne's argument. Swinburne's argument is that God is good,
Okay.
inherently good, and a part of good is that it would create beauty.
Okay,
So
but then I will have to go with mine because I would be interested to hear then
okay, so yeah,
Swinburne wouldn't
my
agree with it.
refutation of that would be is minds don't entail beauty. Beauty is not entailed in minds, and
You're
so
not,
you can have minds that don't have beauty,
but
and so it's just as
you agreed that beauty is an example of something whose aesthetic can only be
wait.
appreciated
So
by a mind.
again, all roses are flowers, not all flowers are roses. So we have minds that can know English, and there are some minds that don't know English. So beauty is like English. So you can to say that there is a mind fundamental to the universe doesn't increase the probability that beauty is fundamental to the universe. Just like it doesn't increase the probability that English is fundamental to the universe because minds can have it and cannot have it.
But it doesn't have to be beauty. It is beauty because that's the big example I have of something that
Right.
can only be appreciated
Right.
by
It
mind.
applies to all mental things. Yes.
But in a world that already has a preeminent mind, it's more likely that there would be such features that could only be appreciated by mind. A priori, there is no reason to say that that's the case. Like,
Well,
what is the
So
argument?
that's the part I'm refuting. So I'm saying you have this mind that has properties that are appreciated by minds, you say it. So this thing that minds appreciate, there's two possibilities. Either the things the mind are appreciated are generated by the mind or grounded in the mind, like in a God sense, not like subjectively imagined sense. And it's possible that the appreciation of the mind is a result of a natural process like evolution. Those are the two possibilities. So if you have a preeminent mind, either its beauty is a result of its own grounding or grounding of things outside of itself. So assuming that there is a preeminent mind gets you the possibility that it's grounded in the mind, but you can also say, just assuming there's just a natural world, it could also be grounded in that. It doesn't lean one way or the other because if there is a preeminent mind, that mind still has the same dilemma. It doesn't increase the probability or decrease the probability. It's still the same dilemma. Either this sense of beauty is grounded in itself, or the sense of beauty is grounded in something else
Even
outside of
if that
itself.
dilemma isn't solved, that doesn't concern us because our concern here is the universe contingent upon such a mind? Whether that dilemma goes on to that mind in other possible worlds is not our concern.
No,
Our
that's literally the concern. So what would increase or decrease the probability is if this being exists, would it change the fundamental feature of reality to make it more likely that we see this feature? So if it doesn't increase the probability, then it doesn't work as an argument for your what you're saying. So what we're saying is does this God solve the problem? If it doesn't solve the problem for itself, then it doesn't solve it for us either. It's just like what's it pushing it back a step?
but I didn't bring this up to solve the problem.
Um,
I brought this example to say that a probability of a disembodied mind is increased. And are
right.
you
So
disagreeing that it's increased?
yes.
Because
Yes, I'm disagreeing. Yes, I'm
we
disagreeing.
as
So
minds.
let me see if I
Sorry.
can.
Let me finish. We as minds create things that other minds can appreciate. So what reason do we have that some other mind wouldn't have the same property?
So again, different argument here. So if we're asking what grounds beauty, we're saying, well, it's more likely to have beauty in a world that it's grounded in some kind of a mind. So we'd say that's you're arguing for the grounding of beauty. Why does beauty exist? Well, it's grounded in a mind, a preeminent mind. And so I'm saying that's no more likely than saying beauty is grounded in the laws of nature. And you're saying, well, yes, it is because the God is a mind. Well, I'm saying, well, God doesn't solve this problem because it's like if we have a coin, we can say either beauty is grounded in a mind or grounded in nature. And so it's like a flip of a coin, 50-50. And then you're saying, well, it's grounded. If it was grounded in God, we'd expect it to be more than that. But God has the same coin. God hasn't solved the problem. So he's still stuck at 50-50. There's no probabilistic difference between God asking this question and us asking this question. So it doesn't improve the probability one or the other. It's just the same coin. He's holding the coin or we're holding the coin. The coin is still 50-50 either way. So it doesn't improve the probability
But it's
one
not
way or the
our
other.
concern right now.
What's
Whether
that?
it improves. Our concern is whether
Isn't
the
that what your
probability
argument
goes
is?
up or down when we hear observed beauty.
Right. So that's the coin. The probability is one side of the coin heavier than the other side of the coin. I'm saying it's 50-50. Either it's beauty is grounded in nature or beauty is grounded in God. We have a coin, 50-50. And God, saying God exists, God has the same coin. Unless God can solve this problem and answer,
But
yes,
nature is
beauty
not a
is...
mind. Nature is not a mind.
Right. So it's either grounded in a mind or not grounded in a mind. So I'm saying those are 50-50. Right? 50-50. Either it's P or not P.
Yeah.
So you're assuming God is there. I'm assuming not God is there. We both claim beauty is objective. And then you say, God raises the probability. I'm saying how? Because if somehow God grounds beauty, either God's grounding of beauty is in his imagination, subject to his nature, or it's grounded in something outside of his nature. How does God answer this question? How does God raise the probability? It's like if God has the same problem, then it doesn't raise the probability. It's just the fine tuning of the universe. What fine tuned the universe? What fine tuned that? It's just pushing the step back a stage. It doesn't improve the probability. Like, how do you
Which is
perceive
not
this?
our concern right now, since our concern is whether this world is can be probabilistically reduced to whether it corresponds more towards the side that there is a mind or not.
No. That's exactly what we're asking. I could say the if there is a quantum particle that creates everything in the world as it is, that raises the probability to our universe of one. It's exactly one that everything in our universe is created exactly as it is. So we can make infinitely many models that create this stuff in our universe exactly
But
as it
your
is.
molecule is not a mind, so
It
there's
doesn't need
no
to be
reason
mind.
why.
It creates.
Huh?
It doesn't need to be a mind. That's irrelevant. I can say it created beauty as a law of nature, like gravity, and we experience beauty, and it was determined
So
to do
now I'm
this.
asking you, what? There is no reason, a priori reason, why that molecule would produce things that can only be
Yeah,
appreciated by mind,
there's no a priori reason why a mind would either.
because it appreciates those things.
No, that's begging the question. Like, minds don't need to appreciate those things. You can have minds without appreciation of beauty. So the fact that you are assuming there is a mind that appreciated beauty is no different from me assuming there is a quantum particle that's going to create a beauty law. Those are both equally circular reasons. They don't work for either of us.
I don't see where I fail. I think I made my point pretty clear.
Clearly not. So beauty is a thing we can imagine, and it could be a mind if there is a preeminent mind. It may or may not have beauty as a feature of the universe. Like there could be a God that creates the universe without beauty. Perfectly fine. No logical contradiction there. So you're assuming that a God would create beauty, whereas the probability of God's creating beauty or not creating beauty is 50-50. There's 50% of gods would create it, 50% of wouldn't. So the probability of nature is the exact same. 50% of nature might have a beauty law, 50% might not have a beauty law. So right now, our probability of which causes beauty is exactly the same. You got 50-50, I got 50-50. There's no reason to conclude one way or the other in this case.
Yeah, I completely disagree with that.
Okay,
But I guess for the sake of convenience, I would want to move to my third argument.
sure. Go
Okay.
for it.
Okay. So the third argument would be basically a version of the version of a cosmological argument, but not. But it's designed to kind of
Could you give
it,
the argument first before the background?
yeah, it would be like the Kalam argument. So um,
What's the
the
argument?
it's a slightly modified one. So
What? Don't tell me about the argument. Tell me the argument.
okay. So the things that have a nature to begin to exist must have a cause.
Sure. Okay. What's the next
Since we
premise?
okay, since we observe that all-encompassing physical things, one way or another, do begin to exist, they must have a cause, and their cause must be
All
something that
encompassing physical things. What?
okay.
Begin to
So
exist.
okay. So let me clarify.
Or no,
Since the
just
universe
say it
had a
slower so I
beginning,
can
okay.
say it slower so I can type it out.
Since the universe had a beginning, it must have a cause. Its cause must have different properties than the universe.
Sure. Totally
You agree
agree.
with that?
Yes.
Okay. Would you say that there is something physical outside of the universe?
Yes.
But that's non sequitur because by definition, universe is all of physical existence. So you're
No,
saying there's something more
no one in
physical.
physics defines universe as all physical existence, so that's false.
Okay, what's your definition of the universe?
It is the space-time continuum represented in the equations of general and special relativity.
So what's there that doesn't encompass all of physical existence?
The multiverse, string theory, Hilbert space,
Multiverse.
qubits.
Wait, multiverse. Multiverse is just infinite number of physical universes, right?
Right. So when we say the universe had a beginning, that just means ours, nothing more. Full stop. Our universe, our physical space-time as represented in the equations of general and special relativity had a beginning. Does not mean all universes did. Does not mean all space-time did. Does not mean all matter did. It just means our universe, this one that we exist in, only the equation represented by general and special relativity, that thing had a beginning, nothing more. Does not mean everything.
Okay, what would be a appropriate term to describe all of physical reality?
Cosmos.
Okay. The question is, did Cosmos? Sorry, just a second. Oh, nothing. I'm sorry. I just need to. So, are you saying that the cosmos
Did not
are you
have a
saying
beginning.
Cosmos did not have a beginning?
Yes.
So it's something that has always existed?
Yep.
What is the argument for that?
What is your argument that God has always existed or exists outside of space-time? Either are you using those synonymously, so you can.
Because God is defined as non-physical.
That doesn't mean non-physical things could be contingent too, so that doesn't help you. So why would you? What is your argument that God is?
For me, because physical implies having physical properties.
So forget the physical. So we have a non-physical thing. What is your argument that a non-physical thing can exist eternally or without non-contingently? Because non-physical things could also be contingent, right? You could have a non-physical thing that was created, like God could create an angel or something, right?
No, of course, but I'm saying that the ultimate cause would have to be
right. So that's my argument. Forget the physical. Just say, why do you think that supernatural is even a category that has this property of necessary? Why do you think necessary is a property of supernatural things as opposed to just unknown natural things?
Because natural presumes having physical properties, and physical properties by definition imply having a physical explanation.
No. We already went through that. So you can have a physical brute fact, doesn't need an explanation.
I don't understand what it means to have a physical brute fact, because it seems to be like those are contradictory. What's the point of it being physical if it doesn't have a physical explanation?
Again, explanation doesn't require anything. Physical is just, is it measurable in some sense? Is it measurable, testable, observable? That's all it means.
That implies physical evidence behind it.
Yes. Is it potentially possible to have physical evidence behind it? It's potentially possible to have evidence.
So that's why I don't accept that the ultimate cause can be physical.
Because why?
Because it would have to have physical properties that are testable, measurable, and explainable.
Sure.
And those things would have to have a cause.
No. They could be brute facts. They don't need to have a cause. So go back to your argument.
Then they're not. Yeah, that's the
modified. No, you're begging the question. Like no one cares. No one says that physical facts need to have an explanation. The principle of sufficient reason is garbage. No one gives a shit about it. Philosophers don't care about it. Scientists don't care about it. It's garbage. So no one accepts that you can have physical brute facts. Not a problem. But go back to your original argument. So there's, as far as we know, every physical thing we've interacted with, other than energy, is contingent. It deteriorates over time. Granted, we have no examples of any supernatural things. So why do you assume that supernatural things don't also deteriorate over time?
Because that's just question begging. You're already assuming that the interaction here is physical interaction, right?
No. I didn't question back anything. So I'm saying physical things we know of deteriorate. Granted, we know of nothing, as far as I'm aware, of anything supernatural. So that means the probability that it does or doesn't is, you have no reason to conclude at all anything about the supernatural. So you can't say they're not also deteriorating. So why do you assume that it's more likely that they're the necessary thing than just an unknown natural?
Because at least in their case, it's not definitional.
There is no, again, definitions are just stuff we've made up in our heads. They don't correspond to reality. So you can't say, well, it's definitional that physical things aren't the necessary thing, because no one accepts that. No one gives a shit in philosophy. No one gives a shit in physics. We don't define it that way. Your definition doesn't mean a damn thing to us. So we don't define it that way. Try again.
Are you saying that there can be a physical eternal thing?
Yes. So, well, there's Either it's physical and eternal, as in like an infinite regression, or it's physical and outside of space time. Either of those are perfectly fine, and it's like whatever sans space and time, like William Lane Craig's quotes. Either one of those are possible. Both of those can be physical. There's no reason to include it's non-physical.
But then I don't understand what the workable point is of having naturalism. I believe that the whole point is that we can account for these things. Yours cannot account it.
No, so accounting has nothing to do with it. We don't care about accounting. We care about whether or not.
No, look, I'm not asking whether you can account it. I'm asking, is it ultimately something that can be accounted for?
Right, no, brute fact. We don't care about accountability. Accountability is not relevant to anyone's position in physics or philosophy. We don't care. There can be brute facts that are physical that don't have no explanation. Perfectly fine. We don't care. That's not a problem.
Are you saying that the cosmos is such a fact?
Yes, the fundamental nature of reality, which we would define as some part of the cosmos. Yes,
but that the reason that's question pegging is the debate is about the fundamental.
You said it. You said by definition it can't be. We're saying we don't use that definition, so that argument fails. Give us something that does. Give us an argument, because your argument failed. You said by definition. Well, we don't use that definition, so that doesn't work. What's your argument? Our argument is induction. We have inductive reason to conclude there are natural things. We have no reason to conclude there are supernatural things. It's always simpler to just add a property of necessity to a known thing than to add an entire new ontology. Therefore, we conclude the fundamental.
So now I'm asking you, how would you distinguish between a physical brute fact and a non-physical one?
That would be up to you. Like you're positing non-physical things, so you would have to give me some kind of description of what these things are. Like I don't know what there are, so I wouldn't have any way to.
Well, my assumption was that anything that doesn't share physical properties would be non-physical.
I don't care what your assumption is. So again, here's my argument for.
You don't agree with that?
I don't care what your position is. So I have no idea. I don't know if I understand it or not. So here's my argument. We have evidence of physical things. It's always simpler to add a property to a known thing than to make a new ontology that has no known thing, no basis in reality. So it's more reasonable to conclude that the fundamental nature of reality is a natural thing. There's a necessary natural thing, rather than to insert an entire new ontology and say it is the necessary thing. So I have good reason to conclude the universe, the fundamental nature of reality, is physical, natural physicalism, whatever you want to call it, and not some kind of supernatural God thing, not non-embodied mind. So what is your reason to conclude it's non-embodied mind? It's not definitional. We don't have a definition that forces this to be the case.
How would you... Well, that's also a question. How do you know that the minds we have are embodied, right? I mean,
so that's based off neurology, psychology, all the others have concludes that. It's not question begging. You still don't have an argument for your case. Why? How do you conclude that supernatural is a better explanation than just adding a new property to a known stuff? Why is it better to make up a new ontology, a new entire class of things, than to just add a new property to a known class of things? How is that a good explanation?
Because presumably the physical properties of it would make it physically reducible.
No, that was never part of my definition. So your straw man doesn't make a difference to my argument. So again, you need to make a difference.
Are you saying that you are rejecting physical reductionism?
Yes, there are definitely non-reducible physical things. That is the point. You can have brute facts that are physical things that do not reduce to anything. They are brute facts.
Well, I assumed that physical...
reductionism does not apply to everything. It applies to just the stuff we know about in a testable sense. It's a methodological...
But I thought that you used physicalism and physical reductionism interchangeably.
Reductionism is a methodology. It isn't an ontology. It's not saying if reductionism said literally everything is reducible, clearly that doesn't make any sense. So reductionism is a methodology saying...
Well, I said physical reductionism.
Right. It's a methodology. Reductionism is a methodology. It's not an ontology. Literally no reductionist says literally everything is reducible. That doesn't make sense. That's stupid. Clearly not. So again, reductionism is a methodology. So it's irrelevant to the conversation. You still need to answer the question, why would it be more reasonable to assume there is this new ontology of supernatural that grounds this, that has this necessary property, and it isn't just a property of necessary things we haven't discovered yet? Why have you inserted this new ontology baselessly? Why would that be better than just saying it's a new property of natural things?
Because then it's just then it's simply then it just becomes a definition thing. Look, if you want to say
definitions make no difference, so you can make up definitions are not evidence.
Okay, but if you want to argue that what we define as God is just another natural thing, I'm fine with that. I'm going to go with that.
Right, I'm not saying that. So remember, God is a disembodied mind. So I'm saying it's not a disembodied mind. It is a natural unguided natural process kind of a thing. It's not a disembodied mind. Why would you insert a
Then I
disembodied
then
mind?
I already asked you that would make absolutely no sense, because then there would be no difference between minds and mechanisms, and you are not willing to entertain that.
I have no idea what you mean by that. So that was a different argument. I don't see how that connects in any way, but sure, like yes. I mean, minds are mechanisms. I don't know what you mean by that.
What distinguishes them?
They're the same.
Traditionally,
Minds are mechanisms. They're kind of mechanisms. There's hammers and screwdrivers. Those are different mechanisms, but they're mechanisms. Brains are also mechanisms that
then there is no agency.
No, agency is perfectly fine in mechanisms. Agency is a product of brains. It is a mechanistic process, not a problem. So your definition of agency is a straw man of ours. We don't care about your definition. But yes, you can have agency that are a product of mechanisms. Like I said, AIs will have agency. They will be mechanisms, not a problem.
Okay, so I would like.
Oh, wait. So your argument was that the reason we should insert the reason we should insert a disembodied mind to explain the necessary foundation of reality is because agency. That's your argument.
No, because I'm saying that at least a non-supernatural cause is not by definition self-defeating.
Again, so definitions, there is no such thing as.
So what's the point? I asked you to actually take a look. Arguments from definition are deductive arguments.
Arguments from definition are things you imagine. It's literally all arguments from definition are arguments from incredulity. I imagine it to be the case.
Are imaginary?
Yes, deductive arguments are arguments from incredulity. We know they're false. They don't apply to reality. Many philosophers made deductive arguments against Einstein, said time is not a physical thing, therefore it can't bend, so you are deductively wrong. They were all dumbasses and got it wrong. We don't care about deductive arguments. They're not evidence. What we care about is correspondence to reality. So it doesn't matter what you define to be the case. What matters is whether or not your definitions can be shown to exist in reality, which you can't do. The fact that you arbitrarily like to define it this way doesn't make a difference to us. We don't care. So the fact that you arbitrarily like to define physical reality as reducible, that's your problem. We don't do that. Not a problem for us. So your definitions of physicalism may be contradictory. They're not ours. They're not contradicting our worldview. There's no problem here. So again,
so then I don't see what the point is of that. If you're just saying that what you define as God, we're just going to say that's
there's no disembodied mind. We have no disembodied mind, so we don't. So your silly kind of God thing doesn't exist. Like, why are you inserting this strange?
Well, because you're defining as disembodied something that doesn't exist. So yeah, God isn't going to be disembodied.
No, it's just a body. It's just a physical thing, like a space-time field, nothing more. There's no mind there. There's no disembodied mind.
Look, if you want to say anything that has existence is defined as physical, then I'm fine with that. But there is no need for physicalism. You could just say you're someone who accepts existence, right? We're not disagreeing that God has actual existence. What we are disagreeing
is that God has a mind. So I'm saying there's no disembodied mind. So you're saying there's this. When I say new ontology,
how do you differentiate a disembodied mind from an embodied mind?
Well, inductively, but we'd say, like, does gravity have a mind? In your world?
No, because it's a mechanism.
Right. So I'd say that the fundamental nature of reality is like gravity.
So how does mind have normativity if it's the same kind of mechanism?
Again, normativity, morality, I think you mean differentiation of some kind.
Yeah.
Minds are a product of brains as far as we can tell. As long as you agree that gravity doesn't have a mind, I'm saying the fundamental nature of reality is like that, not like a brain.
Right, I don't think we're going to get an agreement here. So I would just rather move on to my fourth argument.
Sure. Go for it.
This is my final one I prepared to. This is that in a world where God existed, we would expect there to be communities that believe they received God's revelation, or at least had experiences with God. We have such communities.
Wait. Why would you expect that? There could be gods that didn't do that. Why would you expect that?
Correct, but any God that would do that, we would expect it from.
That's circular. Any universe that would has a law that creates societies that makes it believe in God would have societies that believe in God. So why would you expect that there is a God, or that would create societies that would?
I'm saying the probabilities increased.
Right. So I'm saying how, because I'm saying there is a universe that could create a law that would make societies that believe in God, and there's a God that could create societies that believe in God.
There is no a priori reason for that
there's
at all.
There's no a priori reason for either. So either both are equal.
Because any of God's revelations or utterances, right, would be consistent with God's nature.
Right.
Because that's how God is defined.
So you're saying God has a nature that he will do X. And I'm saying nature could have a nature that it could do X. Why do you?
But there is no. Yours is.
There isn't an a priori reason in God either. You're saying God has a nature. God has X nature.
Look,
that's not a priori.
Look, if your rationalization is post hoc.
So is
Because
yours. That's kind of the point. I'm mirroring your argument.
no, it's definitional.
No. So okay, sorry. Then mine is definitional. I'm saying by definition, nature has a nature that would create societies that believe in God. I'm going to define nature that way.
There is no reason for that at all.
It's a priori. I'm just defining it to be the case.
But there is absolutely no reason.
Exactly. That's why it's not. It doesn't work for God either.
I can't give an argument for why it's more probable.
Okay, sure.
With God.
Go. What's the why would God have this nature?
Because, okay, look, if God exists, right, which is a disembodied mind exists, and there's a community of people that recognize this existence, that is by definition more consistent with the existence than non-existence. Whereas in the universe,
no, it's not. So again, that fails.
So you're just going to say it's not?
Right. So it's consistent with a reason that causes people to do this. That reason, it's not more consistent with that reason actually being true than that reason being false for a false reason. Those are both consistent. There's no more consistency with its truth than its falsity. So like,
I don't see the argument.
So your argument is that if there is a society that has a belief in God, that's more consistent. If there is a God,
no, I wouldn't say that one society. If we have
the number of societies doesn't matter. It's irrelevant to the argument.
Sure, but if we have the only mind that we can agree is capable of having such experiences, right, such as revelation, and that only society or group invariably everywhere has such experiences, by definition the probability goes up rather than down.
No, the probability goes up that they have something that causes the experiences. The probability does not go up. The experiences are inherently true. That is not the case. So yes, all societies have this.
Correct. That is correct, but in any scenario where that revelation was to actually happen, the probability that people would be receiving it would also go up. Do you understand that? That's by definition.
Yeah, so if a God existed who wanted to give people revelation, the probability that they would have revelation would go up. Yes, correct. But if the probability of there being a God who gives revelation is equal to the probability of people of the revelation being true or false, then it doesn't go up. It's the exact same. So for example, if you have if I believe there is a God, or I have some kind of revelation of God, if the probability of God existing and creating a revelation is exactly the same as me believing there's a revelation for a false reason, the probability is exactly the same. It doesn't change.
But I'm not just saying that all revelation must be revelation from God, right? I'm just saying that there is awareness of his existence. That's
irrelevant to my argument. So my argument is grant revelation. I don't care. We have this revelation.
But I'm not necessarily even arguing that it's God who's be revealing. The fact that this revelation became known is more likely with his existence.
I'm granting that does not make any difference to the argument. So I'm saying we have a revelation that became known. Now, the probability of it being true or false, just from our human perspective, maybe there's a God who did it, maybe there's a God who didn't do it. Now, if you're saying, we're saying, well, what would raise the probability one way or the other? Right now, it's the same, 50-50, P or not P. And you're saying, well, the reason it would raise the probability is because there is a God who would do this, who would cause us to. If
I'm not saying that. Stop it. I'm not saying that he would cause it. I'm saying that the knowledge of his existence is higher probability that he exists, whether or not it's he who revealed it. Got it?
No, knowledge. If you're claiming it's knowledge, that's by definition.
If there is a community that believes that TJump exists, the probability that TJump exists goes up rather than down, whether or not TJump is the one revealing that he exists. Got it? So this is the only
we would expect
the community to recognize it more than we would expect.
Yes, that's what I'm saying is false. There is some phenomenon. I don't care what the people believe. It doesn't matter what the people believe. Some people believe X. There is some probability that it's true. There's some probability that it's false. You're saying it's higher than it's lower. I'm saying no, that's not the case. There are actually more false beliefs in people than true beliefs. So if we're just going based off induction, it's more likely false. But just saying, starting from an equal standing point, it's 50-50 and we're saying we have this belief. It's 50-50 true, 50-50 false. You need something that's going to raise the probability. You're saying just the fact that we believe it does not work. No. Doesn't matter how many people believe it.
The fact that it's universal and persistent would also
makes no difference at all. Like I can show every person a picture of an optical illusion. It doesn't raise the probability it's true. No. So what you need here is the reason that God doesn't raise the probability is because God has the same problem. Like the assumption that it's true isn't more likely if there is a God than if there isn't a God.
If there is a God, it is more likely that there would be communities.
Right, that's false. That is wrong. That is demonstrably false.
Okay, so what's the argument that it is false?
Because if there are it is equally likely that there is
It's
no
not
God.
equally
Wait,
like
wait, wait,
it's
wait,
not.
wait, 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 wait.
I'm
Stop.
not disagreeing there.
So
I'm
if you're
not
saying
disagreeing.
it's more likely that there are going to be people who are communities who believe in God
If there is one. If there
I'm
is one.
saying that is false. It is equally as likely there are going to be communities who believe in a God if there is no God. It is not more likely if there is
So
a
what?
God.
That's just post hoc. There is no argument for that. There
Yes,
is
there
no
is.
a
I gave it to you
priori
before. I say
argument by
there
which
could
we
be
would
a
expect that.
reason. There could be a reason that causes people to have communities who believe in a God if there is no God. Like there could be evolution could cause this to occur, or a different law, or a different feature of nature that causes this to occur. If, like, for example, the number of gods who will create a world that has beliefs is 50%. The number of universes that will create worlds that have beliefs is 50%. So the probability of a universe coming about with people who have a belief in a God is 50% God, 50% no God. They both have a 50-50 chance of creating beliefs of God and a 50% chance of creating beliefs with no God. So this belief does not increase the probability one way or the other of whether there's a God that causes this belief or whether there's no God that causes this belief, like a natural process. They are still the same. Did my argument make sense, at least?
Well, it did make sense, but it seems like we're approaching from different places. You're starting from the fact that there is this experience, and both things could equally account for it.
Yes.
I'm not disagreeing there. I'm not starting from the experience. I'm starting from the proposition. There is a God. Now I'm asking you,
Okay. So
has this
let me start from the proposition. I'm starting from the proposition. There is a natural thing that produces this. There is evolution, or some law of nature.
okay?
Okay. So we both start with the proposition. There is this universe. So there is this universe that creates these beliefs. You start with the God-based universe. I start with a non-God-based universe. They both seem to have equal probability. What's the difference?
Because fundamentally, you're not listening to what I'm asking.
That's
We
not a
start
difference.
from.
What is the difference?
Okay, let me formulate it. There is a God. Now I'm asking you, starting from this proposition, is it more likely that there are communities acknowledging that existence, or less
50-50.
likely?
It's exactly the same.
So the fact that he exists doesn't make any difference to what the communities establish, right? To what's established within
So
the
like,
community.
if you said there is a God, what is the likelihood of a community's believing in a God? It's 50-50. There's a 50% chance that God would create societies that believe in him, and a 50% chance they wouldn't. It's 50-50.
Well, that's just argumentless.
Well, it's just P or not P. You're saying, well, since there's no reason to conclude one or the other, it's just P or not P. So if God, what would God create jelly donuts or not create jelly donuts? It's 50-50. Like, we have no idea. We know nothing about the God. All we know is that it exists. So you've
Okay,
told
so
me.
you're saying that any person's existence does not make the community of
No,
believers.
I'm only talking about God here.
Why?
God's properties.
Why?
Because you asked, if there is a God, is it more likely that there will have just
So that's
any
just
property?
special. So that's just special pleading.
No. This is literally just propositional logic. If there is a God, what is the likelihood that God had created jelly donuts in this universe? Well, it's P or
Okay,
not P. Either it did or it
you're
didn't.
not listening to me. Do you accept that any existence, by definition, makes the probability of there being communities that believe in that existence go up?
No.
So you're saying that you existing does not make it more probable that there will be communities who have
The
beliefs that you exist.
probability of unicorns existing doesn't mean people are going to see unicorns. The probability of tribbles existing doesn't increase the probability of societies believing in tribbles. No, the things can exist with no one believing in them at all. Like, it does not in any
That's not
way.
what I'm asking. What I'm asking, are you saying that things that exist do not make the probability go up?
No,
That there
exactly.
will
There are
be
lots of things that
so
exist that
that's
no
just
one
bullshit
believes.
because we can show it to be false.
No, you're an idiot. There has to be some connection to the thing existing to it causing beliefs in the people. There has to be some connection between those two. It can't just exist. There's lots of things that exist out in the universe, like, that we have no idea what they are and don't imagine them. That's perfectly fine. The fact that it exists doesn't increase our probability of imagining it. No. Like, there has to be a connection between the thing existing and some kind of epistemic uh, connection between that and our belief that it exists. Those are two separate things. A thing existing and our belief are separate things, and for it to increase the probability that we have the belief, there has to be some connection between the two. Like, the existence has to cause us, like, the existence of photons or light or whatever would cause us to believe in light because we experience it. So obviously our experience of it increases our likelihood that we're going to believe in light. But just any object existing does not increase the probability that we're going to believe it exists. Like there can be things that we have no reference from it whatsoever, and there's no increased probability that we're going to believe it exists. So there has to be some connection between its existence and us. It has to touch us in some way, cause us to give us a belief in some way, a sensation in some way. It has to affect us in some way for it to raise the probability, right?
I agree with that.
Yes.
And
So,
that's
so just a God existing does not raise the probability unless there is some additional thing there that he's going to interact with us in some way to increase that belief, right?
okay. Let me rephrase that. Does the existence of a Christian God exist?
Yeah. Yes, a Christian God would raise the probability that.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So now let me change it. Would a monotheistic God, like the God of Islam, Judaism, and Christianity?
Christianity?
Yeah.
Yes, the same as the Christian God. Yes.
Okay. So that would be one of my arguments for this kind of God.
All right. So
That I,
would a law of nature that, like evolution, that creates an
you
evolution?
have no reason to think that it exists.
What?
You have no
You have no
reason
reason to
that
think the Christian God exists. So again, this isn't an argument that we're starting from the position, if there is the Christian God, would that increase the probability of people having beliefs in a God? Yes. If we have a law of nature that causes beliefs in God, would that increase the probability of having beliefs? Yes. Right?
Okay, so I agree. What's your reason for going with the naturalistic one rather than the one that's but even if it increases for both, that still doesn't change the fact that it increases for my position, right?
Oh, right. So I'm saying, does it increase more for the belief in a God as opposed to the belief in
So
no
the
God?
argument is valid. You can see that it's valid.
If your argument is just that if the Christian
It
God
increases the
existed,
probability.
if the Christian God existed, that it would increase the probability of there being beliefs in the God rather than if no God existed or no
Yeah,
Christian God existed specifically.
yeah.
Probably yes, but
Okay,
that's
so
not the
that was
argument here. So
that
the
was my
argument,
fourth argument.
but that's not the argument here. The argument here is if would a God increase the probability over no God, not just the Christian God versus any God. It's God versus no God, right?
Yeah, I agree.
So if there's any, if we just assume there's a God, if it's a Christian God, that increases the probability of people having belief in a God, as opposed to it just being a deistic God who doesn't care. So obviously, if we're comparing possible types of gods, then that could raise the probability. But the same thing applies to a natural world. So in natural world, there's certain kinds of laws that would create people to believe in a God and certain kinds of laws that wouldn't. So you have a law that, like evolution, that causes people to believe in a God because it's beneficial, or you have a universe of just black holes. So there's no beings. So just like there are gods who would cause you to believe and gods that would cause you not to believe, and believing in a Christian God would be more likely than a deistic God in the hypothesis, the same thing applies to the natural world. So we have laws that would cause us to believe in a God and laws that wouldn't cause us to believe in a God. So there's a 50-50 among the gods. 50%, I don't assume 50% are kind of theistic and want to interact with the world, and 50% are deistic. 50% of the universes would create a universe that causes belief, and 50% wouldn't. So if we're looking at it from the perspective of just God, the Christian God may be more likely than the deistic God. But if we're looking at it from just universes, the laws that create belief would be more likely than laws that don't create belief, from like the anthropic principle. But if we're looking at both, the probability is still 50-50 for both. There's 25 for each. And since we know that it's more likely that the ones that created belief exist, then it's the probability for the universe that has laws that create belief is more than the possibility of the universe that have laws that don't create belief. And the probability for a God is more than the probability that creates belief, is more probable than a God that doesn't create belief. But the probability of a God who creates belief and the probability of a universe that creates belief are the same. They're both more than the other options within their own segment, but they're still equal to each other. So the probability of a universe that has a law that creates belief is exactly the same as the probability of a God who has a law that creates belief. So those are equal. So you can't say that a God existing is more likely to no God existing. Those are the same. The probabilities for those are the same, but the probability of a God who interacts would be more than a God who doesn't interact, just like the probability of a law who causes beliefs is more than a law that doesn't cause beliefs. So the probabilities of God and no God are the same, even if it's interacting God would be more than no interacting God. Does that make sense?
It does make sense, and it doesn't address what I asked.
Okay, what did you ask?
I asked whether my argument was formally valid. It is.
Yeah, I assume it is. I don't think any of your arguments have been invalid.
But does it show what it presumes to show? That the possibility for a God existing goes up proportionately
No.
with.
So the probability of a God who interacts with the world is more than a God who does not interact with the world. That I could grant. There's problems with that too, which I would go into, but it's irrelevant to my point. But that would also be true for a non-God. So that doesn't increase the probability compared to a non-God. So it doesn't say God is more likely than no God. That is not the case. It says
But
an interacting
do you
God would be more
understand that
likely.
the existence of any object increases the probability of there being communities devoted to
Remember,
having beliefs?
we went over that. There can be objects that have no correlation to our beliefs
The
whatsoever.
fact that it can be doesn't change the general rule
No,
that
no,
that's the
no,
way it is.
no, that's wrong. So the fact that things exist does not increase the probability of us having beliefs they exist. No, that is no one believes that.
It's literally that's how it goes.
No, it's literally not how it goes. So for most of human history, people did not believe in quarks. But quarks existed. Did that raise the probability that we believe in quarks? No, it doesn't. If we have no interaction with them, if there's no way for us to sense them, their existence does not raise the probability that we're going to believe in them. No, that does not work.
Yeah, I just don't know if we're going to come to an agreement. But I thought I presented, just to recap the four arguments that I presented, where the first one was qualia as argument again. Sorry, three: qualia, intentions, and justified true beliefs as example as evidence against a purely naturalistic phenomena, including purely natural minds. Second argument was argument from beauty. Third was the Kalam argument, and the fourth one was the argument from revelation. So my conclusion is that I have successfully presented reasons that make the belief in God go up. Would you disagree with that conclusion?
Yeah, I debunked every one of those and conclusively showed they're complete crap, which is why the vast majority of philosophers and physicists in every field think they're also crap, because none of those indicate anything what you're saying for the reasons I
So
explained.
who's a philosopher that disagrees with the argument from beauty?
I could Google it for you, but don't know off the top of my head. Me, there you go.
You're a philosopher.
Yep.
What qualifications do you have in philosophy?
I studied it. There you go.
But that simply makes you a student of philosophy.
Nope, you don't actually have to go to school to be a philosopher. There are lots of philosophers throughout history who didn't actually graduate. You don't need that. So that doesn't actually work for your case. Like, I can definitely find people who reject the argument from beauty. They all reject, like most philosophers reject the argument from beauty for a God. I think 30% accept that beauty is objective, and 30% reject it, and 30% have like no position on it.
Well, I think in that case they mean something like else. I think all of them would agree that it's mind independent. It doesn't depend on any one mind.
No, that's exactly the 30% thing we're asking. Like, is beauty objective or mind independent? 30% say yes, 30% say no, 30% say undecided. You can fill surveys paper. I don't think they use the word beauty. I think they use a different aesthetics. I think they use the word aesthetics or something like that. But so no, the most philosophers are atheists, so they reject this has anything to do with God. I mean, I can grant beauty is objective. That doesn't make a difference whatsoever, but it can be purely natural. And that is something that most philosophers do agree on. If it exists, it's natural. Same with morality. So no one accepts these arguments. Like 15% of philosophers are theists. They don't work for theism. You can anything the supernatural can explain, the unknown natural can explain always. For the reason I explained earlier, I can just say it's a law of nature we just haven't discovered yet.
Right. Well, it's sad that our conclusions differ because I thought I presented a really good case. But I hope that at least your viewers have been more willing to research because I'm a former atheist, so I think
Research what? Like all of the philosophers agree with me. Like I'm just getting this from philosophers.
yeah, I would disagree. I cited Richard Swinburne,
Well,
William Lane
okay.
Craig.
So by all I mean the consensus, not I. There's obviously I've read Richard Swinburne. I've had email conversations with Richard Swinburne. His arguments don't work for the same reasons I explained before, which is why they're rejected by the consensus of philosophers. And by all I mean consensus, not literally everyone. So if you research the consensus of philosophers, they're going to lean on the side that Swinburne and the theists are wrong about pretty much everything.
Yeah. Well, I have to go now because I have several errands to run. But if there are any future engagements on similar topics, I would be happy to. If you want to set up a specific discussion about something like argument from beauty, just about the argument, I would be more than happy to because I have try to formally defend this argument. Because a lot of people seem to be discounting it, and I'm actually a proponent of the argument. So I would be I'm not opposed to
Specifically for God or just the objectivity, because those are two different
no,
things.
no, forgot. I
Yeah,
mean, like the argument from beauty forgot.
sure.
So I would be more than happy to have future engagements about that. Or just something more specific, something like because I came in prepared for like to present the four arguments that I came in with, but I would say I favor the argument from beauty specifically,
Okay.
because it seems to be a underappreciated argument that I have used successfully in many cases.
All right. Yeah, it
Uh,
was pleasant talking to you. You're
okay.
definitely not as bad as Darth Hawkins. Give you that for sure. Props.
Yeah, I guess.
But yeah, yeah. I
That's
actually saw you debating him. That was pretty funny too. You did a good job. I'm impressed by your
yeah.
dunking of Darth Hawkins. So, but yeah, it was pleasant conversation. Thanks for
Okay.
chatting with me. I'll talk with you later sometime.
Okay.